Our first item of business tonight is Ministerial Order M192. So that is that Council is holding this meeting without members of the public in attendance under Ministerial Order M192, as Council chambers cannot safely accommodate the unknown number of public participants wishing to attend, and that Council is committed to ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability through the submission of written comments and the provision of live and recorded broadcasts of the meeting. So look for a mover of Ministerial Order M192, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. So I'll call the question. All in favor, please. Anyone opposed? And that carries unanimously. Item number 6 is approval of tonight's agenda. So there's two additional items. So the action would be, or the suggested resolution would be, that the agenda for the December 14, 2020 regular meeting of Council be adopted as amended. 1, to move item 14.2, notice of motion from Councillor Albedos for consideration prior to item number 14.3, 5-year financial plan. And secondly, inclusion of all supplementary items, so all written submissions received thus far. So look for a mover of that. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a comment or a question. I'm trying to touch the screen. Oh, there we go. Hang on a second.
I can hear you, Councillor. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
I'm a little bit unsettling to get this supplement agenda with 23 letters on it at sort of 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I didn't get it till like 4 o'clock. It makes it really, really difficult for me to read all those letters, and other than just give them a quick check over. So what is the plan tonight when it comes to those letters?
So all of the items that came in were to deal with the public hearing and the public input session for the items that are in front of us tonight. So there's a certain deadline that members of our constituents have to provide something in writing in order for it to be packaged up and sent to us. So that's how the public hearing works, given that we're unable to receive this direct input directly in a council meeting. I'll turn it to our corporate officer though. Ms. Machada, please.
Your worship, yes. The cutoff for submissions is 12 o'clock noon on the day of the meeting, unfortunately. And items were coming in right up until 12 o'clock, and I believe that my team had that sent out by 12:20. So I don't think that there's any faster that we could get that out unless we change our submission deadline.
Okay, so there's no new reports. It's all public input related to the items on the agenda.
But again, point of order, in the past, you've read those out. Are you reading them out tonight? Because we're going to be here till 2 in the morning. But what is, when it comes to these submissions, once upon a time when council was meeting, they were able to stand and give their little report. They won't on these cases because they're just letters, right?
Well, they're letters, and then when we had much lighter agendas and working under the ministerial order was newer to us, we were reading them out. Now that we've been in this under this ministerial order for quite some time, and will continue through this way until April, as I understand it. I mean, I had the opportunity to read them all, so I'm comfortable with what's here. So my process as chair would be that we would accept these and we wouldn't be reading them out. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the agenda, please. All those in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? Councillor Beddoes is opposed, so the motion carries. So this goes to item 7, which is our first item here. And this is our public hearing in regards to 7.1. So I'm just going to ask our corporate officer, there's a statement that I typically read out. Would this be the time to read it, or would it be after we receive the staff report?
No, your worship, now would be the appropriate time, as the staff report is part of the public hearing.
Okay, understood there. So I'm just going to read said statement that I had open right in front of me. Sorry, everyone. I had it open and I closed it. Okay, so our first item is a public hearing. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act. At this public hearing, any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that are the subject of this hearing. Copies of written submissions received to date are available. It is important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaw, and it is my responsibility as chair of this hearing to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. For those of you who wish to speak, our corporate officer will at the appropriate time invite you to commence your address to council by clearly stating your name and municipality of residence. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed bylaw. Submissions must be received before or during the public hearing in order to be considered by council. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation or submission. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. Everyone who deems his or her interest in property to be affected shall be given the opportunity to be heard at this hearing. No one will be or should feel discouraged or preventing from making his or her views known. Please note that this hearing forms part of tonight's regular meeting of council and as such is being video recorded. Videos and their contents, including any personal information disclosed during the hearing, will be posted on the district's website. Okay, so for that then, that opens it, and I will move to staff in regards to the zoning amendment bylaw number 791 for 2182 Church Road. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'll just begin here by sharing my screen.
It may be the case where Ms. Machada is sharing hers first. Okay, there we go. Thank you. We can see it now. Go ahead.
Thank you. The subject property was rezoned to Wadhams Way Comprehensive Development Zone in March of 2016 to allow for 133 residential units. With this proposal, no changes are being proposed to the 133 residential units that are currently permitted under the zoning bylaw. The amendments proposed will reduce the housing forms to 2 types, rearrange the placement of uses on the site, reduce the single-family lot size to 250 square meters, prohibit suites, provide details on strata amenity space, public park, open space design, and road layout. The rezoning proposes the following map changes. So with Area A, single-family dwellings will now be dedicated towards Wadhams Way and Church Road, creating a perimeter design that interfaces well with the surrounding properties. Area B will strictly be dedicated toward multifamily units and proposed as townhomes. Area C will be dedicated as park, which was previously a multifamily site. And Area D from the current zoning will be removed and is being provided as the necessary park space, as previously mentioned, as Area C. So you can see on the right side of the screen, that is what the map is being proposed to change to in the zoning bylaw. As the current zoning's in place, allowing for 133 units, the proposed rezoning maintains the density and uses. Specific to housing form, only single family and townhomes will remain, with the removal of duplexes, apartments, cluster dwelling units, and assisted living facility. A reduction of 100 square meters to lot size is proposed, along with a 5-meter height reduction to multifamily units and an increase of ½ a meter in height to single family dwellings. Value's been added with the allocation of strata amenity space for additional playground dedication. Parking requirements have been met, plus 31 additional on-street visitor parking spaces have been provided within the proposed developments. The map here that you can see is the proposed open space area. So the blue dash line is the area indicated in the courtyard, which will be part of the private strata area for use by those residents. And then as you move to the right of that, there's a solid red lined area, and that's the proposed strata park area that will have a statutory right of way for public use. and it includes a children's play area, sport court, and lawn area, which is just under 1,000 square meters. So that would be open for the public to use. In addition, in the bottom right-hand corner with the dashed red box area, where it says park and dog in brackets, that's the other public area dedicated for use. And that area has rain gardens as well. This map here shows the proposed road classification. So there's a mixture of public roads, which are that pink purplish color, as well as the blue strata roads. So those would be the ones maintained as part of the strata townhouse location within that portion of the proposed development. TIA was provided and recommended single access off of Church Road, and a fire lane access will be provided onto Wadhams, which you can see extending at the southern portion of that development. With a 1.5 parking space requirement for townhouse units, there'd be 117 parking areas located, as well as 2 parking spaces per single family dwellings, which is the equivalent to 108 parking locations. And as previously mentioned, the additional 31 on-street visitor parking spaces will be provided. On the environmental side, with tonight's attendance, the applicants will be presenting some further information on this. So I'll just at a high level touch on what's been provided and reviewed as part of the application. Department of Fisheries and Oceans visited the site in November of 2019 and reviewed the proposed ditch realignment works, which consist of removing the riparian vegetation, which is adjacent to 2 non-fish bearing ditches, and redirecting 2 non-fish bearing ditches into constructed vegetated swales and rain gardens. The combined areas of vegetated rain gardens and vegetated swales proposed will provide a 35% larger area than the original 2-meter stream protection enhancement area along the northern property line. The 2020 Riparian Areas Assessment Report indicates that the replacement rain gardens and swales will provide the riparian features, functions, and conditions equivalent or better than the existing situation on the property. The rain gardens will offer quality flow, insect drop, and other nutrients, as well as new habitat for amphibians. If rezoning is approved, supporting documentation will be provided with the development permit process, documenting this further. Proposed contributions for the site: an affordable housing contribution will be provided from the applicant at a rate of $1,000 per unit for a total value of $133,000 for the developed site. 59% of the proposed development is in the form of multifamily residential use, which exceeds the minimum requirement of 25% from the official community plan. And as mentioned, with the park's dedication, there's just over 1,000 square meters of parkland that will be dedicated, which is the equivalent of roughly 2.5% of the lot, and construction of that public off-leash dog park with the amenities. The remaining 2.5% that it was required as part of the total 5% parkland dedication will be provided as cash in lieu. For proposed improvements with the property, a 2.5 meter wide multi-use pathway along the entire frontage of Wadhams Way, improved multi-use pathway along Church Road, a signalized crosswalk at Anna Marie Road, sidewalks and pathways within the development that connect to regional networks, secondary fire lane functions as a landscape pedestrian greenway, and statutory rights-of-way for public use of internal sidewalks and pathways. On the road infrastructure side, dedication of land for a roundabout, which is proposed at the Church and Throop Road intersection, and a $28,500 cash contribution toward the intersection realignment for that. Wadhams Way frontage improvements for connector cross section, Church Road frontage improvements, internal public roads to modified cross section, and the required fire lane. All of these improvements include street trees and street lighting as per Bylaw 404. With that, staff are recommending that prior to further consideration, that an amendment be considered just to recognize that the single family dwelling height is in fact 11 meters and not the 10.5 meters as currently stated in the bylaw. as well as the accessory buildings of 4 meters currently in the bylaw, and replacing that with accessory buildings which are in fact 6 meters. Following that, staff are in support of third reading to the bylaw, and that council accept approximately 1,025 square meters of parkland dedication and accept cash in lieu for the remainder. And that prior to final adoption of the zoning bylaw, the owner enter into a section 219 covenant to address the parkland dedication and construction, road dedication and construction, secure public use of strata green space, frontage improvements, servicing requirements, a pedestrian activated signalized crosswalk, statutory rights of way, park maintenance, and other necessary works and services. With that, that concludes my presentation, and the applicants and consultants are in attendance tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Powell, for the presentation. I'm just going to ask that you please stop sharing your screen, and so that I could see council back in front of me, please. So what I'll do is just open this up. At this point, there's no resolution on the floor, so I'm going to ask council if you have any questions of the staff report or any questions that you may want that staff didn't answer that the applicant would need to answer as they're available and on the line. And then we'll go to the public for any registered speakers. So questions only. Councillor Logans, go ahead.
One question, and I believe we may have covered this previously, but I'm forgetting, so I'm hopeful that staff can remind me. There's an access off of Church Road, but not Wadhams, and what was the reason why?
That's correct. As part of the transportation impact assessment that was provided for this application, it was determined that access from Church Road was sufficient, and that only the access for fire emergency purposes would be provided from Wadhams Way. So that recommendation was coming from the TIA provided for this. Okay, and
if it turns out after these units have been sold that it's no longer sufficient, is there a way that we can open that road up in the future?
Just have to take a look again at the width of that fire access. Right now, it's just maintained as a fire lane. So in terms of the necessary width to have through traffic, it might be the instance that it's just a one-way exit if that were to be the case. But based on the information that's been provided through the TIA, it's not anticipated that would be a concern in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions from members of council? Questions? Councillor Bateman, then St. Pierre.
Okay, through you to staff. I'm curious, and this is a general question, in working with an applicant, how much pressure does the district put on an applicant to ensure that the original zoning regulation is followed? So in this case, I'm thinking of that 350 square meters for a single family lot.
Certainly. With any applications and a willing applicant to go through the amendment process, they certainly have the opportunity to make a proposal that's contrary to any of the regulations that are within that zone. So certainly at that time, we would have stressed to the applicant with their initial submission that these are what had been accepted by council and the public at that time, and it's in bylaw. So if there were to be a change, there would need to be significant reasons stated as to what their justification was to have support. Based on the information provided, a lot of this had to do with the overall proposal of amenity space and marketability for that product, and providing something that they felt would meet the needs of the community in terms of the product that they wanted to build within the district.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious about the visitor parking spaces. Parking being such an issue everywhere. How will this development ensure that those parking spaces are strictly limited to visitors and that residents don't park their third car in any of those spots?
Certainly. So those spaces that are on the public roads will be public spaces. So In a sense, they would be used like any other public road within the district of Souk. So that type of enforcement isn't planned or in place for this. Within the strata area, those would be under separate strata regulations as part of that corporation.
Okay. Now, I'm curious about the letter that we received from Ms. Johansson today, referencing her contact with a ecosystem biologist with Ministry of Forests, Lands and Natural Resource Operations, who advised her that the issuance of a permit would require approval under the Water Sustainability Act. Have you had a chance to look into that?
Yes, we've reviewed all the correspondence. We've had discussions with numerous ministries regarding this, and certainly the environmental concerns that have been expressed by the public. And it may be appropriate for the applicant to provide further information on this, as they've actually been having a lot of ongoing dialogue with the ministry on how to address those concerns. So if it's acceptable, we perhaps should hear from the applicant regarding those specifics.
Maybe what I'll do, Mr. Powell, is I'll just see if there's other questions from members of council, and then we can have the applicant come on and address them all sort of as a whole. Okay. Anything further, Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I do have a question for the applicant, but I can wait until he's.
Well, actually, I would share it now so that they can prepare for it.
Well, one of them, it relates to the amenity building, and I understand there will be telecommuting office or offices in that building, and I think that's a great move. I'm just curious about how many offices, and I see in the plan that it refers to flex spaces as opposed to dedicated office space.
Did you have anything else for the applicant to answer? Okay, thank you. So we'll have them come forward and address anything additional at that time. I'll go to Councillor St. Pierre. I believe you had a question.
Yes, I have two questions. The first one is with regards to a piece of correspondence from, I think, Mr. P. Stocco, and he had a number of recommendations and potential requests in terms of cycling infrastructure. And I was wondering how that meshed with what's already being done with the property, with the statutory rights of way and so on and so forth, and whether his concerns were actually being effectively addressed.
Okay, so we'll get all your questions. So then the applicant, it's just easier if they kind of can process all of these and then come back to us with the answers.
Not a problem. The other one had to do with the letter correspondence from P. Johansson as well. And I was curious, given the lack of, I was surprised myself to realize recently that given the lack of any sort of tree management bylaw, that anyone who purchased a property could potentially cut down all the trees. How does it impact on, for example, the Ministry of Forests and trying to protect amphibians and so on and so forth? Is there any mechanism, or is it simply when there's a development process in place that we get to protect the wildlife, and if there's no development process in place, someone could just cut everything down? So I'm curious about that piece.
So certainly there's different levels that get involved. So if there isn't any development that's being proposed on a property, there's very few mechanisms in place for planning and development to be involved in that process, unless the municipality had specific bylaws in place that would regulate this, and that likely might become a bylaw enforcement matter. So in the absence of that, conversations with the provincial government would be necessary to determine if they've had any infractions with specific provincial acts and regulations at that time. And then a provincial officer would then possibly do an inspection of the site to determine where there has been a disturbance of the land and specifically what those issues are, to communicate it to the landowner or applicant.
If I could have a follow-up question. So that means there's no mechanism necessarily at our level, but there are mechanisms at the provincial level. Is that correct?
That's correct. A lot of the work that we do at the planning and development level when there's an active application is ensuring that if any future development were to proceed, that it's done as per the municipal bylaw requirements, and in addition to providing whatever technical studies are required at a provincial level to ensure that there's been compliance with their provincial acts and regulations. So there'll be a requirement for sign off by the province before we could issue a building permit if that was the proposed development in place.
And if there was no building permit or development permit, is someone still in a position, having recently purchased a tract of land, to remove all the trees, mess with the streams, and so on and so forth? I'm just curious about how does that work?
So it would be a case-by-case basis. So if there was reason to believe that a certain infraction was occurring with a provincial act or regulation, a complaint could be made to the province, and an investigation would be undertaken at the provincial level.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes, please.
Yeah, this is through you, Your Worship, to staff. I talked to a resident a few months back, and they said that they've actually seen steelhead caught in that little stream in the past. And I just want a clarification. You stated that the stream or two streams were not fish bearing.
That's correct. Based on the information that we had.
Who's that come from? Sorry to interrupt, but who made that determination?
Department of Fisheries were out on site, as well as the applicant had their professional biologists prepare that information. So I'm sure they can elaborate further on that analysis that they conducted as part of the application process.
Yeah, okay, I'd like to hear that. Thanks.
Any other questions from members of council? Councillor McMath, go ahead.
I love almost everything about it, but my issue from day one has just been having single access to this property, these properties. And so what's the cost associated, and who does that go to if we were to widen that right now, which is only sort of carded as a fire access point? What's the cost and who does it go to expand that so that it's not just stuck in that zone?
If there was a desire in future by the municipality to open that portion of laneway to a public access road, that would likely become the requirement of the municipality to open that up, because at that time it would be a development that has since passed that process for construction on the property, and so that would be an initiative undertaken by the municipality if that was the desire.
Thank you.
Mr. Paolo, just in regards to this development, I understand that the developer will be committing additional development cost charges to the municipality for improvements to Church Road. Can you speak a bit about that? And I'm just looking at how the roadway system is, what our internal plans are to improve the road connections and safety along Church Road, given that now we're adding more traffic to it.
So certainly, I don't have the specifics on the interim intersection improvement plan, but what they're essentially doing is providing the necessary land dedication in the northeast corner, so that as part of our upcoming design work for Throop Road and Church, that we can have the adequate space to develop a roundabout in that location to then funnel traffic more accordingly along Throop, down Church, and then along Wadham's Way as well, and vice versa in the opposite direction. So a lot of that work ongoing as part of 2021 and moving forward, the design work, and ultimately when that construction occurs, we'll likely be able to address all of this in a timely fashion. Recognizing at this point right now, we're just talking about rezoning. The applicant still needs to come forward with the development permit, ultimate subdivision application and approval, and then finally the building permits for these sites. So there's still quite a drawn out process for the applicant to go through if there's successful rezoning. But at this point, this would just be the main indicator that what they're proposing right now to make those modifications are necessary. If not, they would just be then proceeding potentially with the zoning that's in place for 133 units without all the additional supporting information that they provided with this application.
Okay, thank you. And then further to that, in your presentation, you'd mentioned that we will see a pedestrian walkway along Wadham's, as well as some frontage improvements along Church Road, including lighting. What has been coming up is comments from residents in regards to new lighting and how bright it is and how it's sort of lighting up the whole sky. Do we have some ability to work with the developer so that we can have the downward or dark sky, or I think it's called dark sky lighting, so that the sidewalk or the walkways are lit up, but the whole night sky and area or other residents are impacted by the new lighting.
Certainly. So the applicants are on this call and would have heard that suggestion. So as we move forward, if rezoning is successful tonight and we proceed through development permit and subdivision, we can continue those conversations to address that as the overall design for this subdivision and certainly the frontage improvements that would complement that.
Okay, seeing that there's nothing else from members of council at this time, I'll now invite the applicant just to answer some of the questions that have made from members of council, and then we'll go over to members of the public that are registered. And so just my wish to you is on the lighting, because you'll hear about it down the road.
Councilors, it's Luke Ramsey with Aragon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay, would it be all right if I were to start off with a brief presentation we prepared before answering the questions?
Yep, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Sorry, can we get Councillor St. Pierre to mute his mic first?
Okay, can all councilors please mute? Thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna try sharing my screen. Bear with me.
I'm not seeing the presentation. I saw it briefly.
Can you see it now?
Now I can. Yep.
Okay, great.
I can't hear you though, Mr. Ramsey. I can see your presentation, but I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you
Sorry
and also
about
see
that.
the presentation. That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not hearing you though. I can see the slides moving, so, but now I can hear you.
Oh. Okay, let me try one more time. Sorry, bear with me. Oops, I've shared the wrong window. Okay. Are you? No. Okay.
Our staff are just indicating that if audio is part of your presentation, it might not work due to the screen sharing if it's built into the presentation.
Okay, we'll just try it one more time and then we can just run through it in a different way.
Okay.
Mayor and Council, thank you very much for having us today. We're here to present you the project located at the junction of Church and Wadhams. I'd like to start by introducing the team. Here today we have Doug Ramsey from RWA Architecture Group and Tam Bonamaison from Murdoch Debrief Landscape Architecture. These firms are among the best in Canada and are exceptional at creating the highest quality designs, and we're very excited to have them as part of the team for this project here in Souk. This presentation is to present the proposed change in zoning from CD14 to a CD14 modified zoning. This change represents the same density, amenity contributions, servicing requirements, and land dedications as with the previous plan, but will change the configuration of the site plan and the housing type of the zoning from a mix of single-family, townhouses, and apartment buildings to small lot single families and 3 or 4 bedroom townhouses. First, I'd like to start with a little bit about our company. We've been building projects for 33 years and are primarily based in the Lower Mainland. We made the project to Vancouver Island 5 years ago, where we started building our first project, Esquimalt Town Square, which is a venture with the Township of Esquimalt to transform their urban core by creating a new mixed-use space around their town hall. It's a 4-building project, which includes a new public library, uses a geothermal system for heating and cooling, offers EV charging for every residential unit, and is focused around a central plaza, which is a great location for residents to gather and access local amenities. I bring this project to light because it provides a great example of our overarching goal here in Sooke, to provide needed housing with thoughtful design that can bring a meaningful change to the community. Here in Sooke, we see ourselves helping build community, a community where young families can afford a starter home, a community where people can walk to the town center for groceries or through a local trail network to school, a community where people know their neighbors and feel safe. We plan to accomplish this by creating a vibrant streetscape through proven methods of urban design. This plan is perhaps different from what you're familiar with, but we hope this new housing type will demonstrate to other builders how to bring smarter growth to Sooke's core. Through this development, we plan to bring housing choices for what is being called the missing middle. Typically, these are younger, working-class families who've traditionally been able to afford a home, but with the increase in land and construction prices, the large lots and big homes have priced them out of the market, leaving them with limited options. We're also planning on providing a new off-leash dog park, publicly accessible green space, including a kids' playground, improved street frontage on Wadhams with a connected multi-use pathway, thoughtfully designed landscaping and on-site rainwater management, economic growth through the creation of local jobs during construction, forward-thinking design, and quality, long-lasting homes. With that, I'm going to pass the floor to Doug, who will walk you through some of the details of this development.
Thank you, Luke. RWA has been involved in the design of housing and communities for over 30 years, and we are extremely excited to be involved in the design of this project with Aragon. The site is in an ideal location in Sooke, only a 5-minute walk from the town center, nearby community services, parks, recreation, schools, and possibly a new library across the street on Wadhams Way. A pedestrian pathway aligns the center of the site with Anna Marie Way, providing a direct connection to the town center and the new trail system on the north side of Wadhams Way. We are focusing on providing green, pleasant pedestrian connections to encourage walking rather than driving, to support active lifestyles and opportunities for neighbors to meet. The new homes along Wadhams Way and Church Road are street-oriented single-family homes. This typology follows the traditional residential pattern of front streets characterized by front yards, fences, and gates, and back lanes providing access to parking and garbage pickup. This typology also supports walkability, providing opportunities for tree-lined streets with generous sidewalks and boulevards. Fewer driveways, increased pedestrian safety, opportunities for street parking, and optimized space for street trees and stormwater infiltration, including runoff from the street. Raised front porches contribute to a friendly, walkable neighborhood and provide a transition from the public sidewalks to the private interior of the dwelling. Porches also provide eyes on the street and a valuable covered outdoor space. These homes are planned on compact lots with livable family-sized homes with front and backyards and detached garages on back lanes. They provide the same amenities found in larger homes, but at a more modest scale. The proposed lots vary in width between 30 to 40 feet. These fee-simple homes are opportunities for young families to start out, or for those wanting to downsize and stay in the community. They provide a more sustainable form of development using less land and less resources. These compact homes are comfortable and livable due to the efficient interior layouts that provide a remarkable list of features and amenities typically found in larger homes. Living rooms and family rooms open up to the outdoors, where porches, patios, and landscape gardens become extensions of the living space. RWA has been designing communities with Aragon based on these principles for the last 20 years. The 45-acre community shown here, of Port Royal and New Westminster was one of the first compact suburban communities in the Lower Mainland. It was hugely successful, winning numerous design awards for affordable housing and sustainability. Our site plan features an internal layout organized around public green spaces and a major green spine or roadway. A pocket park and a green courtyard connect seamlessly to the network of streets and sidewalks. The townhouses are located at the center of the site, and they are clustered around the 2 park spaces. Clustering these townhouses around the parks creates a safe place for kids to play and families to gather, while the townhouses along the north and west side provide yards that are a bit more private in nature. The layout of the townhouses creates the potential for breakout areas within the units, including home offices, reflecting our changing attitude towards working remotely and skipping the commute. The inspiration for the townhouses architecture is rooted in the simple rural forms and exteriors found locally and in the surrounding coastal communities. The amenity building creates a community focus situated on the main green spine and adjacent to the pocket park at the heart of this neighborhood. This building was conceptualized as a barn with an expressive structure typical of traditional rural buildings. We are hoping to repurpose heavy timber materials for its construction. The amenity building will accommodate a variety of uses and spaces to support community activities and functions. A large gym, community kitchen combined with a barbecue area, lounge, and flex space for breakout areas are included in the building program. We look forward to Council's approval of this project and trust this project will make a positive contribution to Souk and your surrounding community. I'm going to pass you off to Tam, who will walk you through some of the details of the landscape design.
Thank you, Doug. Our firm, Murdoch de Grief, specializes in integrated landscape and rainwater management design. With any site, we need to understand the natural processes and attributes of the site. If we know how they function, we can develop a design that works with these processes. The landscape presentation will show you how the proposed design respects the site attributes and natural processes that are important for local ecology, for our neighbors, and for future residents of the project. Our first step on this project was to understand the general drainage patterns on the site. We learned that there is a high ridge that forms a drainage divide, and that surface drainage is directed toward 2 separate low points on the east corners of the site. The site has impermeable soils, so rainwater forms shallow puddles in the low points during the rainy season. We also learned that water that leaves our site passes through a culvert and connects to Thrope Stream, which is a salmon-bearing stream. Our project team is committed to realizing a design that provides clean water at the same flow regime to water bodies that are downstream of the site. This slide shows our stormwater management approach. The blue areas on the plan show rain gardens, which are designed to mimic shallow water drainage systems like those currently found on the site. Site runoff infiltrates through the rain garden soil and is biologically filtered, removing sediment, pollutants, and nutrients from the water. Clean water from the rain garden is then directed into the drainage system and eventually to Thrope Stream. The top photo in this slide is from the Eaglehurst development in North Saanich. It shows how smaller rain gardens are integrated with boulevards and around the homes. The bottom photo shows a larger rain garden that is similar to how we expect the 2 eastern rain gardens to look. These large rain gardens create a diverse park-like landscape and provide habitat for a wide range of birds, insects, and amphibians, while supporting downstream fish habitat. The developer has also started to engage with the Habitat Acquisition Trust to look at the possibility of relocating frogs and other species that may be currently on site to a suitable home during construction. I've gone on about the birds and the bees, but I also want to emphasize that we're thinking about people too. This project seeks to create a neighborhood with a strong sense of community, and the design for the outdoor spaces supports that. We've laid out the site to provide a central green spaces in the townhouse blocks, which residents will be able to access from their backyards and via a network of pedestrian walkways. The larger green space is adjacent to an amenity building and includes a playground and sports court, which will be open to the wider community. We want this neighborhood to feel really welcoming. We're trying to design the types of spaces where it's okay for kids to have a water balloon fight in the common greens. We're thinking carefully about the layout and materials that will help us achieve that. For example, low picket fences with gates that open onto the common spaces, allow for over-the-fence chats, and let kids easily run out to play without encountering traffic. We also know it's important to provide a good balance of privacy, both for the future residents of this development and the neighbors of adjacent properties. We've included taller fencing between the proposed patios, as well as taller fences in areas that are adjacent to existing residences along the north property line. The design for this project includes a public dog park at the intersection of Wadhams Way and Church Road. We see the dog park as forming a welcoming gateway into the Church Road neighborhood, allowing residents of this development to get to know the wider community. The dog park is being designed using natural, informal materials and slopes that provide fun opportunities for dogs to play while their owners interact. Plantings surrounding the dog park are designed to be very natural, low maintenance, and to provide a lot of habitat value. Thank you everyone for allowing us to share our design for this great project with you. I'll hand it back to Luke to conclude the presentation.
Thanks, Tam. Aragon is not just a developer, but also a builder. On our projects, we act as a general contractor and hire local trades to complete the work. We want to stay in this community for the long term, and we see this project as our first step here in Souk. I sincerely hope that Council sees the positive benefit of this project and grants our request to alter the current zoning to include this housing typology while keeping it within the allowable 133 unit limit. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you, Council, for hearing us today, and thanks for sitting through the presentation. I hope it wasn't a little bit too much. I understand you probably have some context from the planners already, but I just wanted to speak to a couple of the questions. The first one was about the rooms in the amenity room. So we envision a large part of the amenity space to be more of open concept so that people can work there kind of like a Starbucks or coffee shop style. And then there's going to be 2 larger style boardrooms that you can book. So that if you're, say, a work from home consultant or something and you wanted to have someone come meet you on the weekend or during the week, you could book off those boardrooms. To talk about the bike lanes, I think that was Tony's question. So all of the, so there's going to be the multi-use pathway along the main street frontages. And then inside the development, because they're all publicly dedicated roads with publicly dedicated sidewalks, those will be at the sort of discretion of the township. But the idea is that because they're publicly dedicated, the public can use them as they would any street in Souk. With regards to the riparian and the steelhead trout on site, I'm going to refer to our biologist, Brian Wilkes, if that's all right, who might be able to answer a little bit about the process and we've been through here and the potential of fish on site currently. Brian, you there?
That would be me. Yeah, I've got my camera on and my microphone. Okay, good evening, everybody. A couple of questions arose. One arose around the Water Sustainability Act and its application to the site. And that's not the first time that question has arisen. And so we referred the whole file to the Senior Inspector of Water Sustainability in Nanaimo, a chap named David Robinson. And he looked at the situation there and he determined that the water courses on the site were best described as ditches and are therefore outside the scope of the Water Sustainability Act. So I hope that that answers that question for you. And in terms of fish on site, there's a culvert under Charters Road that is perched so that the bottom end of the culvert is quite a bit higher than the stream bed by about 85 degrees. And one of the biologists in the Ministry of Environment developed an assessment tool for assessing whether culverts are passable to fish. And in order to be passable, it had to achieve a score of 20 or less. And it depended on variables like the length of drop to the stream bed from the culvert invert, the stream width ratio, the slope of the culvert, and the length of the culvert. And so all of those things were examined for that culvert under Charters Road. And the score was 24. So it exceeded the maximum score of 20. Therefore, that culvert was deemed to be impassable to fish. Now, there has been some anecdotal evidence, reports of people seeing dead fish above that culvert. But anecdotes are notoriously unreliable. Does that answer that question?
I'll go to council. Does that answer that question?
No, it really doesn't. If that culvert, I'm not sure when that culvert went in, but it does add to what I was saying about people talking about catching fish in the past. So if the culvert is what's preventing fish from getting that high, it still doesn't mean that it's not fish habitat. It's man-made. We stopped it somewhere along the line with that culvert.
At Banford Park, there's a head wall that the culvert that comes out of the Throop subdivision exits, the stream exits at that culvert. And that's really the end of the stream channel. So even if fish were able to get up past Charters Road, and presumably the next time you redevelop Charters Road, you'd fix that culvert. Then the end of the stream channel is really that culvert at the bottom end of what is it called, Throop subdivision there at Banford Park. So that's impassable. So under no circumstances, it's been agreed by everyone who's looked at that site that there is no way fish are going to get to the site.
Councillor Logans?
I'm thinking along the same lines as Councillor Beddoes. Doesn't it mean if the score of 24, like achieving the score of 24, doesn't it mean that the culvert needs to be adjusted?
Well, when you redevelop Charters Road, you probably will do that. You probably will adjust the culvert so that it's more passable. But right now, it's not passable.
Wow.
I'm going to just ask I just want to go to our staff just for a moment here. In regards to Charters, that is, we do have plans to upgrade Charters Road. It's in really rough shape. It's kind of falling apart in the gully there. And part of that is sort of tied into next items on our agenda. But my question is that when that road is done, would it not be to replace and address the culvert, the faulty culvert? And then should, say, fish be able to pass through it then what happens as they continue to go upstream? Because then they'll actually be able to move through and continue on. And so then, how does that change this? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. My assessment of the stream bed is that there's some nice spawning habitat in the stream bed behind the, is it a ballpark there that's above, between Charters Road and Banford Park? There's some pretty nice habitat in there, but it's very doubtful. In fact, I believe it's not possible for fish to get past that head wall at Banford Park. There's at least 250 meters of a buried culvert that goes through that subdivision.
Oh, I see. So what you're saying is that they clear the culvert, there's still another barrier for them to climb before they would hit this particular development.
That's correct.
I see. Okay. I'm just going to turn back to Mr. Ramsey. Were there any other questions that you had to answer there? And I'm just wondering if you could comment on dark lighting or night sky lighting at all, if that has been contemplated yet?
So it's Luke Ramsey here. We've hired a lighting consultant to do the lighting planning, and we're happy to do that. It sounds like a good idea. I think all the lighting will be subject to review of the district's engineering staff. So it's subject to their approval. So we're happy to comply with that, and we hope to work with them on that.
Okay, so what I want to add is that we've recently learned that our current bylaw just specifies LED lighting. And that's where we have some developments going in with this LED lighting, and it doesn't, there is no request that it be dark sky lighting. My suggestion, though, if you can, is for you to progress the dark sky lighting from the get-go, because you will likely, if you just stick with the LED that illuminates everything, you'll hear from the residents down the road, and then we're trying to fix something. So just having this feedback in place now, it just seems like a good fit going forward, should that be possible.
Yes, of course. Sounds great.
Okay. I just want to go back to council for any further questions. Councillor Bateman, I see you.
Yeah, I just had a question through you to the applicant, and it regards car share. And I'm wondering whether any car share lot was considered for this development, given how central you are, 5-minute walkable community.
So it's Luke Ramsey here. So we did not look into car share. In our experience on the island so far, there's only one car share company, and they have certain criteria that they want to meet in being close to hubs. I'm curious if there's any car share programs in Souk currently, but it is not something we've considered.
No, there is none to my knowledge. Okay, Councillor McMath.
I just want to go back to how there's only one access right now. What's the added cost? Like, we just went through a long process about removing bollards, and rather than go through that again, what is the price difference, or what's the delay in just creating that access now?
Yeah, so I'm going to refer to our traffic consultant here, but I believe going back, it was a direct discussion with engineering at Souk that they did not want another access because of traffic concerns, but I'm going to let Nadine at Watt Consulting speak to that directly.
Hi. Yeah, no, we don't have a price because it hasn't been priced out for how much it would be to convert it to a wider road and bring it up to a municipal road standard. I believe at the last council meeting or committee of the whole meeting, there was discussions around the rationale why the single access was the preferred route for this development. In addition, all of the analysis indicates that the single access is more than sufficient to handle the traffic from the site. So I don't have a cost, unfortunately, for you.
Yeah, there's one thing with like a technical analysis, and there's another thing versus living in it and actually having to deal with it. And after this development finishes, like Mr. Partlow commented on, if we realize later that we do in fact need it, it's going to be so much more difficult to navigate that. So rather than looking at it with that approach, I'd rather we just look at it now. And it looks like, judging off the designs, it's not possible the way that it's been laid out to accommodate an in and an out in that section, that there's really just been left with a single lane option. So if it's not possible for some reason to look at that, then at the very least looking at an exit there, because there is a safety component. And Souk has, besides this development, Souk has so many sections where they're just sort of dead ends, and there's one way in and one way out, and that to me poses like significant safety concerns. And so what is the harm in having a single exit where emergency vehicles can enter in the event of an emergency, but rather than us come back a few years later and look at, oh, we need to remove the bollards, we need to expand. We can't expand because the properties are too close. Why don't we have those conversation pieces now?
Yeah, so I haven't looked for a while at what the actual width of that emergency access road is. But if it is too narrow, then you could always, I mean, it wouldn't be too much more to change it from one from emergency to full movement, or not full movement, sorry, vehicle loading. But there were some other safety issues. So like the safety issues you're talking about are more, you know, in an emergency situation where by adding traffic crossing the multi-use path, we're adding daily safety issues for conflicts between cars and pedestrians and cyclists on Wadham's Way, as well as with the crosswalk that's planned for that location. So in the balance of the safety and operations, the single access was the preferred option.
Okay, I'll just go to our staff. I believe Mr. Carter had a comment on that. And
Yeah.
Council, when you're done, can you just lower your hands? It's just easier for me to see new hands.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And just in support of what Nadine has spoke to, there are like alternate safety concerns we have with the secondary access coming onto Wadham's. You have Anne Marie sitting there. You are going to have the proposed access to the Lot A development. And with the ultimate transportation corridor, putting everything through Church and Wadham's, engineering internally did not support the secondary access, but we did want it to remain sort of a secondary as far as an emergency access is concerned. But the secondary access point onto Wadham's, we did not support internally, and we are supportive of the single access off Church.
So Mr. Carter, just to clarify, you're taking into consideration the transportation master plan that has been adopted that also sees our connectivity going from Church Road through all the way to Phillips Road. So in part as well as some other upgrades, and that's where, in terms of getting the movement and the Lot A development, that's where you're supportive that this is just a fire lane?
Correct, Your Worship. And just like to add to it, you're having multiple roadways come out onto Wadham's at that point. If you had an active access from this development onto Wadham's, everything's just getting bunched up and it's a little too close in terms of 6672 property, Anne Marie, as well as the proposed access for Lot A.
Okay, thank you. So I'll look if there are any other questions that remain unanswered from members of council. I do wish, okay, Councillor St. Pierre.
I think this may have come up in a previous presentation, but I'm curious as to whether or not, or how many EV chargers might be available within the development. And I'm also curious as to whether or not, given that you're working with Watt Consulting, you'll be using some of the transportation demand management strategies that they've recommended prior, or as the development gets marketed and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Yeah, so Luke Ramsey here. So we will be providing at least one level 2 charging outlet per unit. And something that we've actually done on all of our recent developments with great success. And in terms of the TDM measures, I actually don't, I'd have to go back and look at exactly what they were or what Watt was proposing. Perhaps Nadine can speak to that.
I don't actually have that at my fingertips, but we're happy to work with Luke and identify some appropriate measures for the site.
Okay. Are there any other outstanding questions from members of council? Okay, Councillor Bateman, can you just lower your hand, please? Because I still see it there. So I'm going to just ask our corporate officer, is in terms of registered speakers, I think we have at least one. So I'm just going to ask that you please queue up members of the public, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We have one member of the public registered to speak to this item, and that is Ellen Lewers. So Mrs. Lewers, if you could please turn on your camera and unmute your microphone and address council, please.
Hi. Hello, nice to see everyone. I have a couple concerns here in regard to the ditches, alleged ditches. Who said there were ditches? There's been a lot of cattle on that farm, and the streams could very easily become ditches because it become compacted But that water runs and used to run right behind into St. Rose and Youth Family Center into that creek there. So, and that creek then eventually goes into Knott's Pond, which is a salmon bearing pond, which has cutthroat in it. So I would question what you've been told with the ditches in there. I think that has to be dealt with. That's water that feeds that creek, and we don't want to dry that up and destroy that ecosystem. Another point I have is that this is a really old farm. It's a historic farm in Souk, Wadham's Farm, and in our OCP, it says in 4.5.2 objectives F, ensure that there are community food gardens throughout the district of Souk to provide opportunities for residents and to support the local food bank and to support organic food. Especially in this farm, I would ask that there would be a community garden here and be called Wadham's Garden. This is part of our history, and it's a shame that this was taken out and such a development put in here, such intense development, but surely we can put a garden in. And another question I have is in development permits, if we were to, because there's a lot of issues here with with development. In a development permit, if all properties downtown, for instance, were development permit, could we then control how many houses, how many trees are removed and work around the environment? Is that a possibility? And what was the other one? Oh, the traffic coming down Church Road. You do the traffic study, but you don't have the traffic study coming onto Souk Road. And how does that affect Souk Road? We know already, you've all traveled it, the bumper to bumper. Why are we not looking at that as well? What happens on Souk Road? And page 111, hydro overhead electric. I thought we were going underground with our hydro. That was proposed many years ago that the wiring would go underground. So I'm asking why this isn't happening.
Thank you very much for joining with us, Ms. Lures. I'll ask our staff to answer some of the questions and maybe to direct them to the applicant as you see fit. So Mr. Paulo, please.
So I'll answer the question specific to the permitting process, and then perhaps the applicant can kind of address some of the other application processes that they undertook and their findings. But with the tree management aspect, certainly as we accept different plans like landscaping plan and parking and site plan and whatnot, tree management has been one sort of a plan that you utilize to determine which trees will be protected in the event that development were to proceed on a property. So certainly as we progress with our OCP review, those are more specifics that we can put on future developments as well, making those types of application requirements as a submission piece. So you're correct in requesting and suggesting those types of development permit considerations be given. I don't have the specifics in terms of the overhead hydro piece, but perhaps the other items that you had asked questions on, those are more specific to how the applicant's designing their site and the studies that they undertook. Perhaps they might be able to address those in more specifics as part of their methodology.
I had one more question as well. I forgot.
Go ahead, Ms. Lures.
The trees that are being planted, that you showed the trees on the boulevards. Now, some of the area I see is strata. So are those trees and the maintenance thereof, is that controlled by strata, or does the district have to manage those? Like, do we have to look after them with our Parks Department, or are they, the strata ones looked after by the strata and the public looked after by the district?
So anything that's contained within a strata plan is the responsibility of the strata corporation. So in the instance where there's actually the strata park space that's being opened up to the public, that's actually something that we had discussions with the applicant about providing that additional amenity space, but it would still be the responsibility of the strata corporation to maintain that that piece of infrastructure and natural area, because it is contained within the strata corporation's responsibilities.
And the public would be then be managed or paid for by the district?
That's correct. Like any other public road and street frontage pieces, if it's within the public right of way, it's the responsibility of the district of Sauk to maintain those.
And the lighting?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'll just ask the applicant if you may be able to answer some of the questions put forward by Ms. Lures, please.
Yeah, it's Luke Ramsey here. I think Ms. Lure's suggestion of some garden plots, naming them after the Wadhams farm, is a great suggestion. I think there's some really productive things to come out of this. Just to speak briefly to the issue about the right turn on Sauk Road, yes, that's an issue. The district's engineering department asked us to engage McElhaney to do a design to expand the right-hand turn lane onto Sauk Road, which was a condition of the development permit, which we started to do. And yeah, so I guess I can speak to that. Yeah.
So what about the rest of Sauk Road?
I think any other like ongoing improvements to Sauk Road will become part of our planning as a growing municipality that council will work through with our staff. Mr. Carter, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, thanks. And through your worship, to address the hydro concern, Ms. Lures, everything's going underground up to the site, and I can let the applicant speak to the design of hydro servicing on site in their development. In terms of the intersection at Church, as Mr. Ramsey has indicated, the design is in place. We are bringing forward for council consideration to go into construction on the intersection upgrades in Church in 2021, as well as construction of the roundabout, which will facilitate this development. Part of our transportation master plan and corridor projects will include a connector piece that connects Phillips to Throop Road, also for council's consideration for going into design for these projects next year, so they can be shelf ready for future grant applications within the next 3 to 5 years. And with that connection made, we'll eliminate a lot of the pressure on Highway 14.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go back to our corporate officer. Are there any other speakers registered for tonight, either through Teams or on the phone?
Your worship, there are not.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ms. Lures, for joining with us today. I see council back here. So we've received our public submission, some correspondence, and the presentations from both our staff and the applicant. I'm going to ask you now if there's any other outstanding questions that you have. Okay, so there's a suite of recommendations here. So I have sort of 3 different blocks, and we'll go through it here. And I'm just going to ask our staff, Ms. Mushada, do these need to be read independently, or would this be read together as one motion?
First, you need to close the public hearing. The bylaw needs to be read outside of a public hearing in the regular meeting.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. I don't have my gavel in front of me. So seeing how we've heard from the one member of the public, again, thank you, Ms. Lures, for joining with us. So I'll now officially close the public hearing and now move to the bylaw reading. And this can be read in one motion, is that correct?
Can, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to read it out and then I'll look for a mover and a seconder and then we'll have the debate on the recommendation. So that is that council amend zoning amendment bylaw number 791 600-80 2020 by striking out the phrase single family dwelling 10.5 meters and replacing it with the phrase single family dwelling 11 meters in section 814.7A and striking out the phrase accessory buildings 4 meters and replacing it with the phrase accessory buildings 6 meters in section 814.7D. And that council give third reading to the zoning amendment bylaw number 791 600-80 2020 as amended. And that council accept approximately 1,025 square meters of parkland dedication and accept cash in lieu for the remainder of the required 5% parkland dedication as per section 510 of the Local Government Act, and that prior to final adoption of zoning amendment bylaw number 791, the owner enter into section 219 covenants to address parkland dedication and construction, road dedication and construction, secure public use of strata green space, frontage improvement, servicing requirements, a pedestrian activated signalized crosswalk, statutory right-of-ways, park maintenance, and other necessary works and services. So that is the suggested action, and I'll look to see if there is a mover and a seconder for this. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. So now on this particular motion, we'll look for comments, please. I'll turn first to Councillor St. Pierre as the mover. And council, if you'd like to use the now hand signal, that would be helpful.
I think I'll just comment that, as I've stated before, I'm sad that this farmland was rezoned in the first place and that it's being removed. But at the same time, I'm realizing that the town center needs this development, needs this sort of density. And I'm very happy to see what this developer has brought forward because it's showing a great deal of respect for this site and for the wishes of the community. And their willingness to work with the community and with staff is appreciated. I'm interested, very interested in seeing how the development is going to look. I'm aware that this is very much a community-based, closer approach and not necessarily what we're used to. But I'm aware that it's actually a really good design. Well executed, this could be wonderful for the community. I'm looking forward to seeing what we might come out with.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Lajeunesse as the seconder and then to Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I like this development actually. I think it is the kind of density that we do need in the core. We need to get people out of their cars and able to walk to the retail center, which is very close by. And I like the street-facing design of the houses and the laneways. When I go to other communities that are designed like that, it has a much nicer feel than streets that are lined with cars and boats and RVs and everything. So it has more of a community feel to it, and I like this design.
Thank you, Councillor Lajeunesse, and I understand now that the hands feature isn't working all the time, so I'll just wave if the hands feature doesn't work. So I'll go to Councillor Beddoes, then Bateman, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess I echo that I'm still not very happy with this 250 to 350 square meters for from 350 to 250. That's a very, very small lot. Can't even grow a turnip on it. But that ship has sailed, so I won't dwell on that. What I am concerned about, what sort of come up today, is this salmon stream. It looks to me like this is no fault of the developer because they're assessing the situation as they see it now. But from what I can understand in talking to people, this the salmon and the steelhead did come up that far in the past. And in this day and age, we're looking at salmon restoration in streams in the city of Victoria. They've done a lot of that in some of those creeks down there and brought the salmon back. I'm a little concerned that we might not be able to do that in this situation if it goes ahead. The other thing is I have not heard anything about the First Nations. They have some history on that stream, and I didn't know if there was any comments on that. So right now, I understand that I would again like to see it less dense, but that was done in 2016. Not much we can do about that. So that's basically it for me. I do have some concerns, and hopefully they'll be addressed in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. Councillor Bateman?
Okay, for me, it's very mixed emotions with this. As Councillor St. Pierre said, I'm sad to see the loss of this piece of souk as it was. However, I think it's important to remember that the Wadhams family did come to the district, noting that back in, I don't know, 2014 or so, noting it was land rich and cash poor. And their rationale, and I'll quote from some documents from the original zoning, they wanted to bring zoning in line with the OCP. They wanted to provide a flexible, comprehensive development opportunity by making the property marketable, and to allow the district of Souk to grow as a community. And indeed, this is a central part of our town center vision. I think one of the applicants noted that there might be a new library. There definitely will be a new library, possibly a senior center across the street. This is a highly reputable developer building a beautiful small community, pocket community. I do regret that the housing covers such a large swath of the property, though there are those green spaces, so thank you for that. And I think we're off to a good start with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Councillor Logans, please.
Councillor Beddoes, your mic is on.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So I have a few comments. One is that I agree this is a bittersweet moment. It's an interesting outsider's take on what Souk needs. I do get that there's a great sense of community here, and I really enjoy seeing what the developers have brought forward to create that. It's something I hope we see a lot more of in our community. Souk isn't lacking a sense of community, though. We're lacking apartments and condos. So that's a bit of a pull for me. And I do often hear from the developers and other councillors that this would be a great development to get people out of their cars, but the proximity to the town center and just the fact that there are houses here doesn't get people out of their cars. The local economy gets people out of their cars, and we're not caught up to that yet. So as much as folks say that this will help get people out of their cars, it won't until those folks are physically able to work closer, whether it be in their homes or from the district itself. And I am also a bit concerned about the fish-bearing stream. I did just realize now that it does probably connect all the way to John Phillips Park, and so I am a bit scared about the implications this development will have on those water sources.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMath, any comment? Okay. For myself, I do recognize that the property has been zoned, and so we could be seeing something much different here had the original zonings remain in place. I appreciate the efforts that our staff are doing to work alongside the applicant, bringing forward the principles of the new transportation and parks planning. There's more inclusion of the community to move through this, whether or not they choose to is up, of course, to those families and individuals, but at least they won't be hitting a gate somewhere that they would then have to walk around. There's through movement through here. I recognize that we have to do a lot in terms of local economic development. So I'm glad to see that this council is supporting the Community Economic Development Committee that will hopefully move us in that way, as well as addressing telecommuting. Many of our residents through COVID hopefully will have the opportunity to at least choose to work close to home or from home going forward, or go in and out maybe occasionally as opposed to every day. Certainly we're seeing a lot of that emerge going forward. And perhaps there will be an opportunity to keep some of the, whether as Ms. Lure suggested, some community growing initiatives together through the development as that occurs, or for locals who choose to move here to find ways to design that. You can actually grow a lot in a very small space if you do it strategically. And water your plants. So I am in support of what is in front of us tonight. I see nothing further from members of council, so I'm going to call the, sorry, I saw something. It looks like my hand is raised, but it isn't. It is raised, but it isn't. It just can't be lowered, Councillor Logans, but that's okay. I can see you all, so we're good. So on that note, what I'll do here is seeing no further comments, I'm going to call the question on the motion. So in this case, I'm going to ask you to raise your real hand so I can see you, okay? So all those in favor, please. Anyone opposed? Councillor Logans is opposed, so this carries. Okay. I'd like to give my thanks to the applicant and your team, consulting team, for being with us on Teams today, and we wish you good luck in the future into 2021. And we'll see you back here accordingly with a development permit or as the process unfolds going forward. But thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, so I'm now going to move on to item 7.2, which is our development permit with variance for 2170 Charters Road. I'm just going to ask our corporate officer, this is also a public input section, so I just want to confirm as to whether or not I read the public input statement.
Thank you, Worship. No, you do not. That is only applicable to the public hearing, not to public input opportunities.
So nothing for public input. Okay. So I'll turn this over to staff, please, for item 7.2.
Thank you. I'll just find my presentation here to share. All right, thank you. The District of Sauk has received a development permit with variance application for a proposed new 75 multi-family unit affordable housing development by BC Housing, which is in partnership with Macola Housing Society for the property located at 2170 Charters Road. At the meeting held on November 9th of this year, Council approved the issuance of the development permit, but denied the variance request that was put forward by the applicant for a parking variance. Council required the applicant to work with staff to amend their variance request and bring forward for consideration an amended request that was more suitable. So before you here is the amended site plan. The original variance request was to reduce the required parking stall ratio from 1.5 parking stalls per dwelling unit to 1 parking stall per dwelling unit, and to vary the...
Sorry, Mr. Paolo, to interrupt. It's just your slides aren't moving with the presentation. Were we supposed to see the new plan?
Is there not a site plan in front of you?
No, I just see the cover page that says, that has the development with variance in front of me. I don't see, it hasn't moved to the next. Okay, there we go. Thank you.
Mr. Paolo, you're on your notes screen.
Yes, I just exited to get it off the front cover there. So is the site plan up now?
It is, but your notes are visible. It's not in the presentation mode.
Interesting. Is that visible now?
No, now I don't see, well, I see the squares, but I don't see your presentation at all. That works. I can see now it's just the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for letting me know that. All right, so it should be the site plan that's in front of you. So the original variance request was to reduce the required parking stall ratio from 1.5 parking stalls per dwelling unit to 1 parking stall per dwelling unit, and to vary the disabled parking stall requirement from 5 stalls to 3 stalls. The amended variance request presented to council tonight is for consideration to reduce the required parking stall ratio from the 1.5 stalls down to 1.13 parking stalls per dwelling unit, and to vary the accessible parking stall requirements from 5 stalls to 3. This has the effect of reducing the parking stall requirement to 85 parking stalls in total, which is down from the required 113 parking stalls, and reducing the accessible parking stall requirements as mentioned. The proposed off-street parking for this development is 85 parking stalls, comprising of 75 general stalls, plus 3 accessible stalls, and lastly, 7 visitor stalls. If the variance request is denied, the developer will be required to provide 113 parking stalls as mentioned. A parking study was provided with the application, providing a rationale as to why the variance should be supported. This was prepared by Watt Consulting Group, and it, at the time, had reviewed the zoning bylaw for the district and stated that the bylaw does not provide a specific parking requirement for affordable housing. Therefore, the site is subject to the same parking requirements as a medium density residential development, which is the 1.5 spaces per unit. The expected parking demand was estimated for each tenure, resulting in a projected demand for 70 stalls in total. The average demand of 23 parking spaces for the affordable rental units and the average demand of 41 spaces for the near market rental units was identified in this study. BC Housing is proposing to provide 85 parking stalls in total, with 75 being for the general parking area, 3 designated accessible, and 7 visitor stalls. So this is overall a 5-stall increase from which was previously presented to council on November 9th. And that is a result of limited space within the site to add additional parking. Therefore, some of the green space was removed in the corner of this area to accommodate for those additional 5 parking stalls. Again, this parking study also looked at the specific unit types that were being accommodated for, and based on the tenancy agreement that would be put in place, dedicated parking would be allocated for those specific to each unit based on the study that was undertaken and in comparison to other studies that were provided in support of additional BC housing projects within the region. Based on that, staff is supportive of the variance based on the parking study that was provided. And that's based on this being for an affordable housing development, which requires less parking than a conventional multifamily development site. Reduction of the required parking stalls will provide more green space for residents, conceal parking from pedestrian traffic traveling along Charters Road and Throop Road, and require less concrete, which will emit less CO2 emissions. Adding additional parking stalls to the subject property above, the requested 85 parking stalls that are being accommodated, will mean that the applicant will be unable to adhere to the development permit area guideline requirements in the official community plan for concealing parking areas from vehicle and pedestrian traffic. If this is the case, staff will be unable to issue the approved development permit, as it will be required to be reconsidered by council prior to issuance of the permit. As a result, staff support this proposed amendment, and with that, that concludes my presentation. A number of the applicants are in attendance tonight that can answer any questions further specific to the parking variance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Palau. Questions first, please. So I see Councillor Lajeunesse. Question, go ahead, please.
Yeah, more of a comment, really. I guess
We're just taking questions because we don't have any resolutions on the floor. So questions only.
Okay, I'll wait.
Thank you. Councillor Beddoes, then Bateman.
Yeah, this is a question for the developer or the transportation study that they carried out, and they used other examples of low-income type housing. Where were those located? I have some concern that some of them are probably in a more urban center and not as rural out here, because I have a great number of concerns, which I'll bring up later. But my question is, what other buildings and parking ratios were in this mix? Where did they come up with their 1 per unit thing?
Okay, maybe what I'll do is just to queue the applicant up so that they can answer the questions. I'll go through all of council for questions, and then, like we did for the previous one, have the applicant come back on and address them all at once. Is that okay, Councillor Beddoes? Just so they can prepare and we can.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I want to get my questions answered. I don't really care when. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bateman.
So through you to staff, it's great to see in this, the new 5 spaces are all visitor spaces. So we're up to 7 visitors. The question I have is, the district is clearly responsible for parking management along its roads. What kind of strategies will be deployed to ensure that parking along charters remains available to those using our recreation facilities in the area?
I'll just turn to see maybe, Mr. Paulo, go ahead.
Sure, Mr. Carter may want to add more just on specifics throughout other initiatives throughout the district. But typically, if it's a public roadway, those are public accessible parking stalls for whoever is parking those vehicles, if the road specifically indicates that parking is allowed along that area. So in terms of actually dedicating public space for other off-site properties, I'm not aware of anything at this time to provide that type of dedication specific to individual properties, but Mr. Carter may want to weigh in further to that question.
Do you have a follow-up? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Carter.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mr. Paulo. Through your worship to council, yeah, the on-street parking, we will design for it in the corridor upgrades for the charters corridor. But as Mr. Paulo has indicated, if it's public parking, it's public parking. If we want to restrict public parking, it will have to be for everyone. If we would like to allocate parking dedicated for the park down charters, we could do that, and then it would be controlled and have to be enforced by a bylaw, which will take extra resources. But essentially, we're putting trust in the developer's consultant with Watts that the on-site traffic or parking study is sufficient and will not contribute to additional on-street parking concerns.
Okay, did you have a follow-up question? Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I do. Given the concerns of the Sooke Community Association and others, and I do note that in other municipalities, there are things like event parking only signage, no overnight parking, those sort of relatively simple additions that will ensure that we can indeed trust that this project, which is so welcome in this community, doesn't overspill and interfere with other nearby uses. That was a comment, sorry.
I thought that. Councillor Logan's question?
Oh, this is a result of my hand being raised, but not actually being raised.
Okay.
But I will let you know if I have a question shortly.
Okay. Any other questions from members of council? Councillor St. Pierre?
Thank you. I've got 2 questions. One of them is back again to the transportation demand management. The WAC Consulting report was actually specifically for this development when I first saw it. And I was curious because it mentioned actually making use of it if problems developed. And I was wondering why not jump the gun and assume that problems might develop and actually put in the transportation demand management measures like access to eco passes and so on and so forth immediately as soon as people were moving into the development. So I'm curious as to why the decision was made to wait till afterwards? Is it a resource issue? Are the finances not available? That's one question. The other one is there's a lot of concern on the part of the community with this particular development and the one on Drennan, because they're both huge developments that are going to affect the character of the community. And this starts looking more like a comprehensive development. I was wondering whether or not there was room within the OCP process for the people within that area to actually feed into something that would actually help them develop the community as they might like to see it happen. So that'd be for Mr. Paulo, perhaps. Thank you.
Back to Mr. Paulo.
Thank you. So in terms of input into the official community plan review process, we do have a number of stakeholders and partnership meetings that have been set up to get a lot of input on this. So certainly looking to get enough representation to include potentially those views. Certainly it's challenging to engage, but certainly during these times it's even more difficult to engage in a virtual aspect. But we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we get all of those pieces of valuable information included into the process, and then continuously ongoing encouraging that engagement throughout this, and even after the OCP review to be completed, having input to our municipal hall with staff to provide input to support these types of projects and other initiatives to address affordable housing within the community. So looking to a lot of key stakeholders and partners right now to provide that assistance. In terms of the transportation demand management aspect, some of those pieces are dependent on funding support for them. So we would certainly look to determine how those types of initiatives could be funded to then roll it out and potentially include them in future projects as a viable option. So I think there are ways to address what could be a potential moving forward if there's an issue. But staff, as well as the applicant and BC Housing, have looked at numerous projects that they have and have indicated that based on their history and track record with looking at roughly anywhere up approximately only 60% of the units having one vehicle, that this parking should be able to accommodate those people who are going to have vehicles within the site, and that they would use the tenancy agreement to address those issues.
Did you have another question, Councillor St. Pierre?
I'd like to follow up on the question around the OCP, and that's simply as opposed to, I understand the process can involve many stakeholders and that it's difficult to reach out at this point in time, but we have a number of residents that have reached out through correspondence, and I was simply hoping that we would reach back to them in the process of, trying to determine what's going to be happening in that area of Sooke.
Point of order, this is irrelevant to the topic.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Logans. Yeah, it is off base. We have a parking variance in front of us. Okay. I just have one question that I'm hoping the applicant can address, and there has been some comments that once these units are built, they would be open to residents sort of from all over, and yet we're aware that we have families and individuals that need subsidized housing within our community. And I know that BC Housing is partnering with many local governments on the South Island to see more and more units approved everywhere, so that everyone can look to provide accommodation in their own, so we don't have more people commuting back and forth. So I'd just like a bit more clarity in terms of how the application works, and just, it sort of ties into both questions, but just how that maybe how we are trying to look to house individuals and families within our community. So I'll leave it with that, and then invite the applicant forward, please. Just for there was the question that Councillor Beddoes had, and then my own, please. Welcome.
Hi. I did have a few additional items for consideration. Shall I answer the questions first and then?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my name is Kayla Schramm. I am the Director of Projects and Planning for McCullough Development Services, and I'm here representing McCullough Housing Society, who will be the eventual owner and operator of this site. It is currently owned by BC Housing, but that ownership will transfer to a local nonprofit. So to answer the question regarding the examples in the transportation study, those were from the Greater Victoria area, not primarily in Souk. However, I can supplement that data with information from our multifamily project at 6750 West Coast Road. We currently have 17 stalls for 25 units. 6 of those stalls are currently being utilized for parking by those residents. So that's a 34%, I believe, or 0.34, sorry, demand. So that I hope would supplement with a little bit of local data, as well as some of the other similar type projects in the region. Shall I go on to the application process? Okay.
Yes,
so,
thank you.
Sorry, point of order. I don't really feel I've answered the question. You're using a
point of order.
Sorry.
So, okay, I have 2 stacking up here. So Councillor Beddoes doesn't feel his question was answered. And then I just want to hear Councillor Logan's. You had a point of order?
I was just saying that's not a point of order. We should let the speaker finish and then follow with questions.
Okay, so Councillor Beddoes, how about we hear what else the applicant has to add, and then I can go back to you for a clarifying question?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So for the application process, there will be 2 processes for these units. 20% of the units will be rented at the shelter rate portion of income assistance. Those will be tenanted through a coordinated access system that will prioritize individuals in need that are connected to supports. The remainder of the units will be tenanted by McCullough Housing Society through their own application and waitlist process. And there will be an opportunity for McCullough to look to prioritize Souk residents through those applications.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beddoes, your follow-up question?
Yeah, I just, I'm not so sure we're comparing apples to apples when it comes to the one on West Coast Road. It's a smaller thing, and I don't know what the makeup of that is as compared to your development on Charters Road, which is considerably larger and a different makeup of people, I understand. So I go back, basically, I don't accept that comparison. And just to make it clear, you said that any other buildings of this size and complexity were done in Greater Victoria and not in a rural setting. I just want to make sure that's in more of an urban setting and not the rural setting that we have in Souk. Am I right there in my comment?
Yeah, so the other buildings are in, some of them are in Langford and areas that you would probably consider to be more urban. But those places would typically look at a 0.3 or a 0.5 per parking stall per unit. So this is an increase. I would also just maybe add, if I could, that I think that based on the experience, so a couple of things, Charters is about 50% studios and 1 beds, which is the unit mix of the 6750 West Coast Road. So the half of the units would be directly comparable. There is a mix of rents in that particular project, ranging from that income assistance shelter rate level all the way up to lower end of market, which we would actually be offering a very similar mix in this development, though a higher unit count. And we believe that the current parking ratio is sufficient based on our experience at 6750 West Coast Road, and will allow for the realities of lower car usage amongst existing residents, promote lower car usage and dependencies through the available of bike parking in proximity to transit. But in addition, based on that lower demand from some of those expected populations in the building, we'll have the flexibility to accommodate households with higher demand. For example, a 2-car household looking to rent a 3-bedroom unit. We believe that that lower demand will help offset of the half of those units at studios and 1-beds will help offset what could be 2-car households, and we're totally aware and ready to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from members of council at this time for the applicant or for our staff? Okay, thank you very much for joining with us. So I'm just going to go to our corporate officer. We do have some members of the public that are registered to speak on this, so I'll go over to Ms. Machada to introduce those members of the public.
Thank you, Your Worship. We only have one registered speaker for this item, and that is Ellen Lewers. So Mrs. Lewers, if you could please turn on your camera and unmute your microphone, please go ahead and address council.
Hello, thank you. I also want to speak to that issue with the Hope Center. There's not 1, 2, and 3-bedroom places in there, so I don't think I think it's apples and oranges as well. You've got 16 studio, 27 2-bedrooms, and 11 3-bedrooms in this unit. People are going to have to go working in town because, as Councillor Logan said, there isn't anything here. And in our OCP, it also says again, support limited small-scale supported retail commercial nodes within residential areas. We should have, and we've talked about this before in our OCP, that there should be commercial areas below. The first floor should have commercial components so people can live and work here. We're not creating jobs here, we're just creating a place for people to live, and they still have to work in the city, so they still need cars. So 1 car is not going to work. I say you have to stay to those numbers and 5 accessible for disability. But I don't think you can change that. The only way we can change that, I would say, instead of 75 units, drop them in number of units if you want to have less parking and more green space. And also, again, there should be a community garden in this as well. So if it doesn't work out as far as green space area, drop the number of units. I think that it's too high, it's too dense. And are we bringing people here? Have we done a study to find out how many people we need to bring to Souk? How many places we have to provide for Souk? You just approved 133 house development, and now there's a 75, and then the other one on Drennan for 175. That's a lot of housing, one on top of the other, plus all the other housing that's already on the books. So I'd like to see some study that shows that we need that. And our affordable housing study, it showed that we needed housing for people ages 30 to 55, I believe, and mostly families. So I'm not so sure that this is a made-in-Souk development.
Okay, thank you very much for joining with us, Ms. Lewers. Just back to our corporate officer, and again, there's just the one speaker, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Lewers.
I also have another question. You said there was letters from other people for the public hearings, etc., and you weren't going to read those out because they are public information. I believe those letters should be read out so that the public knows what you have addressed or haven't addressed. So in case we should be addressing it,
okay.
Other public members, I think it's a public meeting, so, and they've presented them for public hearing. I think it should be read out publicly.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Ms. Lewers. I'll just ask you to mute now, I need to just have my screen reshuffle back to council. Thank you. Okay, were there other questions from members of council? See none. So the recommendation in front of us here is that council approve a variance to zoning bylaw number
Sorry,
600.
just to jump in, I think Councillor Bateman was trying to put his hand up, but is struggling.
Okay, thank you. You had a question,
Whoever
Councillor
said
Bateman?
that.
Your question, Councillor Bateman?
He's frozen to me.
He evaporated.
I don't know where he went.
Excuse me, Your Worship. This did happen a while ago, and I think he just dropped off and will re-sign in if we just wanted to wait a moment.
Okay, we'll just wait for Councillor Bateman to rejoin the meeting. I don't. So he's going to have to rejoin the meeting. I don't see him in the participants list. There you are. Okay.
Joined.
Question,
it's like
Councillor
comedy routine around here. Sorry.
It's something. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask again the McCullough representative a question around numbers. Okay, so you've got a full slate of parking spots spoken for. The 75 are spoken for, and you have a family applying for a 3-bedroom that has 2 cars. How do you handle that? Do you just say no to that family? And yeah.
Let's see if McCullough representative can answer that.
Hi, sorry.
Hi, welcome back.
Yes, so that is a great question. I myself work in development, not in operations, but I do know that the property management team works closely with all applicants around the realities of parking. And if we're not able to offer a unit that meets those needs, yes, that we would look to try and fill that unit with someone that has the appropriate number of cars per spots available in order to manage that situation appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
I also see that Kevin Albers is available to speak. And would it be the case if there is, say, a family in Langford that is looking for units that they could be placed closer there where they're working?
Absolutely.
Mr. Albers, thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Your Worship and Councillors. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to answer the question. We absolutely have the ability to assign parking and also to offer housing units with no parking. Currently, we're opening a building in the city of Langford where the parking structure isn't built. And so we're renting it to households that do not require the parking at this time. And any of the tenants that would like to live there at this time can't because there is no available parking, but they can move in once the parking is available. So in the example that Councillor Bateman described, we would exactly do that. We would say there is a housing unit available for you, but there is no parking, and we discourage on-site, off-site parking by any of our tenants.
Okay. Councillor St. Pierre, did you have a follow-up question? Go ahead, please.
It was a follow-up question based on a comment by Ellen Lewis. I was curious about the option, whether or not there is one, of having commercial space, potentially daycare on the first floor. Just curious as to whether or not your proposal has any sort of flexibility with regards to that sort of thing.
Unfortunately, we do not have that opportunity right here, right now. I would point out that this development is modular. and therefore some of the efficiencies in the unit layout are achieved by the stackability. And once you start to bring in items such as daycare, you start to lose some of those efficiencies as you can't have those modules stack effectively. So that is not an option on this development. And I did want to make one small clarification to the comment from the public around the number of units. So just that there are 16 studios, 21 one-bedrooms, 27 two-bedrooms, and 11 three-bedrooms, which means there are 37 studios and one-bedrooms. Just a small clarification.
Thank you very much for that clarity. I really appreciate that. I see. Okay. So thank you very much for answering that. And if you could just turn your videos off again, that would be great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to go and read out the recommendation from staff, and that is that council approve a variance to zoning bylaw number 600/2013, section 4.8, parking requirements to reduce the required parking space ratio from 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit to 1.13 parking spaces per dwelling unit, and section 4.9, disabled parking from 5 required accessible parking stalls to 3 accessible parking spaces. So I'll look if there is a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Logans. So now on the motion, Councillor St. Pierre, then Logans, please.
I appreciate that the parking issue continues to be a problem in our community, but in this particular case, we have a housing needs assessment that does clearly indicate a need for affordable housing. And back when we could actually talk to people and shake hands, you know, a couple of years back when we were elected, I spoke to a lot of people, and the one thing that came through from pretty much everyone, whether it was young people or young families or seniors, whoever, it didn't matter, was a need for affordable housing. Obviously, we want to try and manage things as well as possible, but I think this is really an issue of, do we allow the possibility of parking issues in order to actually have the certainty of having spaces that people can actually afford without so much stress, while being able to take jobs in town, while helping our local economy, while moving us towards, you know, more buses and pedestrian infrastructure and so on and so forth. It's more or less what we need, and this is the kind of development we need. I'm actually excited that we have the previous development at Wadhams, which is going to provide a different price point, and another development like this, because this is hundreds of units of affordable housing, and we really need it bad.
Thank you, Councillor Logans.
Thank you, and thanks to the presenters for their information. I'm glad that Councillor St. Pierre brought up Wadhams, because even the developers there did say that their parking stalls are mostly garages, and that they know that those garages will not be used for actual parking, and that a lot of it will spill onto the street. So they only have 30 some odd parking stalls there, and we passed that without a problem. Unlike developments that are for profit, this partnership between Macola and BC Housing, and also the CRD and others, parking can be and will be addressed by assigning parking as part of the rental agreement. In a development that is for profit, we have no control over that situation, and in this situation, there is control over it. So they're doing more than the development we just passed without question. We did get 2 letters of support, one for this project, one for their other project that's coming up from Premier John Horgan. I think that does say a lot. And I agree with Councillor St. Pierre that this isn't a hill that I want to die on. I think I don't think, actually, the community knows, and our housing needs assessment knows, that this development is desperately needed. And these folks are professionals that we're in ways treating them like they know nothing, but they are excellent at what they do. And they have support from incredible organizations. So I do support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, first of all, I don't have any problem with the affordable housing part of it. I mean, that's great. I think we do need that. My problem is strictly the parking, and there's been a number of instances where we made people adhere to the parking. One recently on a daycare, and lo and behold, they end up producing the parking. But I guess my problem here is that most of the comparisons with buildings are in an urban area. And I know firsthand, and I lived in this community 30 years, that people are going to be aiming towards Greater Victoria, Langford, and all those places. And if you have to go to the cancer clinic, or you need the hospital, or the specialists and dialysis, they're all in Greater Victoria. And I don't know if anybody's had to deal with somebody with any of those problems, but you don't put them on a bus. It just doesn't work. So I think it's naive to think that we won't have cars in those positions, hopefully electric cars, but I doubt that very much. So I think 1.5 is actually low in itself, and I cannot support the 1.13. I'd like the staff to go back and rework this again and see if they can raise that up. Maybe 1.5 might not wash, but 1.13, I think what was given is very, very little. I also noticed that we're setting a precedent, because not only is this one now asking for one stall per unit, we're now looking at the Drennan one, which is asking the same thing. So I cannot support this amendment. And this is not Greater Victoria, this is Souk. And when you go down to the end of that Church Road or Charters Road or any of those roads, you're turning left and you're going into Victoria to find jobs. And a lot of these people, when they do find jobs, which is what we want them to do, a lot of them, they will be at some of those jobs that are not 9 to 5. They will be in town at all hours, and I think a car is more than necessary. So I don't buy the 1.13. I like to see something more than that. Other than that, I don't have a great deal of problems with it. We've had a number of residents state mainly concerns about parking. When we first came on to council 2 years ago, the biggest bugaboos were infrastructure, parking on the streets, and all the congestion that it causes. And here we are again, considering to do it worse, because once it's in at 1.13, there's no chance to increase it anymore, and they'll just spill out onto the streets, and I'm not prepared to do that. So I'll be voting against this, just that part of it.
Okay, that's all that's in front of us. Councillor Lajeunesse? Comment?
Yes, my concern, I guess, is with the reduction in accessible parking spaces. There are 8 units, 8 accessible units, and only 3 accessible parking spaces. And as an occasional user of accessible parking spaces, for myself, the proximity to the door is not important. It's that I can get my car door open all the way and get my chair in and out. And a simple remedy for that is to leave the spots on the ends of the tiers of parking open, rather than the way you have them now with the curbs that wrap around the end parking spaces, so that if you need to, if you pull in and all 3 accessible spots are taken, you can find a spot on an end somewhere where you can still get in and out of your car.
Thank you, Councillor Lajeunesse. Any comments from Councillor McMath or Councillor Bateman? Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Okay, we're dealing with a parking variance. There's no question our housing needs report has stated we need to enhance the supply of rental housing. We have to address non-market housing needs. And the report states that we will need 344 units by 2026. Opportunities like this don't come along. It's a once in a generation opportunity. So it is a made in Souk solution. I think it's the challenge has to be to the district to come up with some way to deal with potential off-site traffic. The McCullough has stated they have a very specific policy. They will ensure there's no more than 75, they can only rent out 75 spots, discourage any more than that. And if someone does beat the system and parks on Charters Road, it's up to our bylaw and our operations department to get some signage up. Event only parking, 3-hour parking limit, say. That would cover the length of a ball game. No overnight parking signs. It's up to the district to enable this golden opportunity to happen. So I'm glad to see 5 more visitor parking spaces. I agree the Watt study is flawed in that as you move further out the West Shore, people need cars more than they do and in fact, some of the Langford examples, Goldstream on Royal Colwood, they have a 1.45 vehicle demand. Anyway, that's almost secondary to the fact that McCullough will ensure that it manages its automobile traffic appropriately. But then again, the challenge is to the district to find a way to accommodate this and the community association and the Art Morris ballpark players, Sea Park, the golfers, the whole gang. Thank you. So I'll be voting in favor of this tonight.
Okay. Any comment, Councillor McMath?
Just that, like, any project is never going to be perfect. And so if it comes to affordable housing versus parking, it's right now the priority is not the parking. That's not the #1 pressing issue. It is the affordable housing and spaces. And so that's why I'll be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Councillor McMath. And that raises a very valid point. We have families and individuals living in very insecure situations, unsafe situations, expensive situations within our community. This is purpose-built rental housing. So it's different than the for-profit, market-driven housing that we see throughout our community that is leaving folks and families and individuals behind. This is an opportunity where everyone is contributing, though I would say not the District of Sauk. Other municipalities have given land, have found land, purchased land. We haven't contributed anything to this project so far, and yet we have significant grant money being invested into our community as a result of ongoing advocacy that has happened in our community for a long time, and as well as what our needs assessment says, and even what our not-for-profit like Sauk Family Resource Center and our MLA have been advocating for. When the Premier took office, I told him at the time that priorities coming out of our community was improvements to Highway 14, highways, health, and housing. And so we've seen advancements in highway improvements, we're seeing advancements in healthcare, and yet our families and individuals have been left behind until we have all of these other entities coming forward and answering this for us. So I'm very grateful to see this in front of us. This isn't a for-profit developer. This is a non-for-profit working to get people into secure, safe housing that we desperately need. We as a council in turn have put forward a brilliant transportation master plan to move transportation. We've been keeping the funding for crossing guards, focused on active transportation to move people throughout our community through other modes. And we've also recently seen the transit plan that has been adopted by the Transit Commission. Some of the things, yes, I have taken folks to the cancer center and to the kidney dialysis. I did put my mother on a handy dart service so that she could get that. Is it good? No, it's not good, which is why we're advocating for other improvements in that area to come to us. In terms of the daycare that was met, the daycare's parking challenges were met because they reduced the number of spots available. So they reduced the number of infant and toddler care that would become available, and that's why they met the parking. It's not because they found it, it's because they eliminated spaces. What I don't want to see is an elimination of desperately needed housing in favor of a vehicle. And I get that we're in a rural environment and we need vehicles to move around. But every single development, as you know, Council, has raised a challenge around parking every single time. This is planned versus unplanned. We have tremendous choke points in our community where it's unplanned. This is planned. Will it be everything? No, it isn't, but it's a step in the right direction. we're well aware of a family living in an RV right now and others potentially living in that same unsafe situation. So do you want folks living in their cars? No, I'd rather see them healthy and safe and secure housing by an entity that is managing in a nonprofit way to ensure that there's proper rent controls in place so that they can thrive, grow, maybe get equity and build something and move into some of the for-profit housing that is available. This is an area of housing that we desperately need, and I wholeheartedly support this. I would have supported it the last time even without the variance. I'm sad that we have to cut into a riparian area and cut down more trees to satisfy the need for the parking, but I guess that's just the way it goes. So on that, we've had a full discussion on this at 2 separate meetings. So the motion has been moved and seconded. So I'm going to call the question on this motion. All those in favor, please. And is anyone opposed? Councillor Beddoes is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you very much to the applicant and all funders for thinking of our community. So I'm going to move on to item 7.3, the development permit with variance for 2075 Drennan Street, please.
Thank you. I'll just get my screen shared here. All right, the districts received a development proposal for 170 units of affordable housing, which will be accommodated in 2 buildings located at 2075 Drennan Street. BC Housing is the owner of the site, and they've partnered with Macola Housing Society to manage the site following construction. The applicants requested a variance for parking in order to facilitate this proposal. This here is just showing a location and zoning for the proposal. Subject property is currently zoned RM2, which is your medium density residential zone, and encompasses about 3.4 hectares of land. The site's undeveloped and has road frontage on both Drennan Street and Souk Road. Throop Stream is located to the north, a wetland area to the east, and a mix of single family and multifamily to the north, west, and west. The subject property can be serviced with sewer and is designated community residential within the community growth area of the official community plan. An objective of the community residential designation is to provide a range of high quality housing types, tenures, and densities which can be met with the diverse needs of and attract individuals and families of varying income levels and demographics. Another objective is to provide affordable and attainable housing opportunities to meet the needs of various age groups, family types, lifestyles, and income groups. Housing, not just affordable housing, has become a crisis in BC. A development such as this is the most efficient residential use of the land and existing physical infrastructure while providing infill and intensification along an existing transit route. The proposal includes 2 5-story buildings, each containing 85 units, located on the upper bench of the site, with the topography dropping steeply away from this area toward the wetland and Throop Stream. The proposal also includes an amenity building for residents to gather, with a community garden and a children's play area next to that. The landscape will also feature a rainwater detention pond that serves to improve stormwater management for the site, but also a contemplative area that includes seating. The amenities proposed for the site far exceed the bylaw requirements and will serve to promote gathering and community for those that live in there. The site design also includes an important trail linkage that will connect this site and the neighborhood to Sea Park. Over a quarter of the site will remain in its natural state, including using some of the existing vegetation along Souk Road, with development being clustered near the street and away from the sensitive areas that have been identified. The proposal was evaluated against the development permit area guidelines number 2 and 3, which focus on form and character and environmental considerations for the site and its buildings. The architectural character of the development includes a blend of contemporary and traditional elements, including traditional horizontal siding combined with wood soffits, warm colored accents, and a brick base. The building materials and architectural features include aluminum trim, floating wood canopies at the entrances, balconies with 2 types of metal panels to create diversity in the facade, natural breaks in the facade, and the use of vertical joints using metal and wood panels. The residential buildings are staggered and articulated to reduce the visual length of each building. The roofs are gable-shaped to integrate with the existing single and multi-family context. Parking is primarily located away from the street frontages, which improves the pedestrian experience and also includes loading areas for move-in, move-out convenience. All mechanical roof equipment will be screened from view using solid screen materials. The single-story amenity building is designed at a smaller scale and is centrally located on the site next to the garden area and outdoor amenity space. The landscaping proposed will be of extremely high quality, which will add to the enjoyment of the property to those that live there and will help to buffer the site from adjacent uses, including Soup Road. Facilitation of the proposed development includes a variance request to decrease the parking space ratio from 1.5 parking stalls per dwelling unit to 1 parking stall per unit. The proposed off-street parking for this development is 179 parking stalls. Visitor parking stalls shall be no less than 12 parking spaces located at the entrance of the site, plus 1 disabled parking space located at the entrance of each residential building for a total of 14 visitor parking spaces. The site will contain the required amount of disabled parking spaces. While this is a substantial parking reduction overall, staff support the parking reduction request for the following 8 reasons. The district does not currently have an affordable housing parking ratio in the zoning bylaw, where demand has been found to be substantially less than market housing, which is supported by the attached parking study that was prepared by Watt Consulting. 20% of the residents in this building will be in social assistance units, which means that those residents are significantly less likely to own a vehicle. 3, there are 2 riparian areas and an archaeological sensitive area located on the site, combined with steeply sloped areas, all of which are being avoided with this design. 4, the on-site amenities for residents, which include gardens, amenity building, play areas, and green spaces, will be impacted with increased surface parking. 5, provision of underground parking would decrease affordability of the project and potentially make the development proposal infeasible. The site is located along Soup Road with excellent public transit opportunities and access to daily needs by foot or bicycle. The proposal includes an important trail linkage to the bike park, Sea Park, and the Stan Jones ball field for the neighborhood and future residents. And lastly, number 8, bicycle parking requirements, class 1 and 2, have been met by the applicant, including EV charging station for bicycles in the bicycle storage room. With that, staff is recommending approval of the development permit, including the parking variance request, as affordable housing is desperately needed within the district of Souk, and the proposal meets the development permit guidelines of the official community plan. With that, that concludes my presentation, and the applicants are in attendance to answer any additional questions that council may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Paulo, for the presentation. And given that the other one was just approved, part of the infrastructure improvements here involve the signalization of charters, and then with that, Drennan would become a right in, right out. And then so with folks leaving this particular project, if they wanted to turn into Soup, they would go up Gollage and then to Charters and then turn, and then Charters signal light would allow for movement of in all directions, because right now Charters is strictly a right in, right out only. And then for pedestrians, I'm assuming then that they would be able to cross safely at Charters once the new signal light is in place. So and then also Charters will be upgraded as well with a sidewalk dedicated on Charters. So can you please just confirm the infrastructure that improvements that are coming now as a result of the charters and this project now coming before us?
Certainly, that's correct in the summary that you had provided, and essentially it's a swapping of the right in, right out at charters now to have that now relocated at Drennan, but then increasing the controllability of the intersection by introducing that signalized aspect to the Charters and Souk Road intersection. So that's going to help now with people coming down Drennan from this, going along Gollage, and then further south along Charters to a signalized intersection so they can make a left-hand turn and then head east towards Victoria. So creating that controlled aspect at Charters will help facilitate the additional traffic that will be entertained with both the Charters and Drennan BC housing projects.
And so is there any slated improvements to Gollage? Like just as there'll be more traffic moving along Gollage?
I don't believe I have any information that would indicate that, but I'll just confirm with Mr. Carter if there was anything specific regarding future upcoming design work for Gollage.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Paulo. Through your worship to council, as is calculated right now, there should not be an increased traffic volume on Gollage. Currently, everyone that's coming down Charters is going up Gollage and then down to Drennan to make the left out. With the swap of those intersections, that traffic will no longer be coming down and going eastbound on Gollage, but it will be supplemented traffic with everyone coming from the development up to Charters, which is calculated to be a slight bit less, but I could let Watts Consulting comment any further on that.
No, that's fine. And then in terms of Charters, Charters is going to be with the traffic light going in there. Charters itself will see some improvements in it from its current state, will it not?
Yes, your worship. So we're currently putting forward for council's consideration going into design on the Charters corridor as well this year. So we will be looking at the improvements, which will include sidewalks as well as road improvements along Charters.
Okay, because then I think that also will move a lot of the traffic that goes to the schools and funnels around to church to come back to that intersection. Will just go up and down Charters. It won't even move down through to church. It's just interesting how it moves. Okay. So, and then the other question I had is, given that zoning is already in place on these lands, typically if there was no variance for parking required, would this even come forward to council for the development permit?
Based on the delegation bylaw, if there wasn't a variance required for a proposal that was outside of the town center for a multifamily development, the director of planning would have the ability to approve such developments. But because there's a variance attached to this, that is one of the requirements that this come before council for that decision on the development permit.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Do I have other questions for staff and or the applicant on this item, please, from members of council? Okay, so I'm going to ask our corporate officer. I understand that we do have members of the public registered to speak. So if I could please pass this over to Ms. Mushata.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, there are 3 people registered to speak to this item, and the first is Doug Tichkowski. So Mr. Tichkowski, if you could please turn on your camera and unmute your microphone and address council.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. Welcome, Mr. Tichkowski.
Yeah, you can call me Doug. It's good. Yeah, thanks for listening to me. So first off, my name is Doug Tichkowski. I live right across from the proposed development. I have the pump station kind of right beside me, and then I'm overlooking Souk Road, and then we'll be seeing this development. So I'm not against affordable housing. I am against or concerned about the size of this development. 5 stories will impact us. You'll imagine that. we'll be able to see the building from our place. I can't imagine it. We took some pictures today, and if you look at it right now, out our window, it's dark there. It's always been dark. Not saying that it's not going to change, but it's a dark place right now. We hear the traffic from Souk Road, but the building, the size of the building is what concerns us. Currently on the side of the property, there's 2 for sale signs saying that it's the properties are for 52 and 21 units. And that's sort of what we thought was going to happen there. And it was only, I guess our neighbor Nora mentioned it to us a couple weeks ago. I had no idea that this was happening across our street. So that's like number one, is the size of the development is quite something to us. You know, it's going to be a big impact on the neighborhood. Number 2 is the parking, and we heard this before, is that, you know, it's not a for-profit, and it will be, they'll manage the parking as it is, but it's another neighborhood thing. What happens if they can't manage the parking, or if somebody comes to visit and there's only 14 spots? You know, if somebody's moving or needing something, where are they going to park? They're going to park in the neighborhood. Already on Bell Vista, you know, it gets used for, it's much better now that we have a park and ride. But before, it was people would park on Bell Vista and then jump on the bus, right? You know, the same people that'll be, or the same bus stop that the people that are staying there are going to be living in Drennan would be using. And then the cars are parked here all the time. So we suspect that if there's not enough parking, it's going to affect the neighborhood. So I have concern about the 165 parking spots for 170 units with the 14 additional, you know, visitor spot. Even if they can manage it, I can't really see in living in a non-urban place. So that's my second point, is the parking. The third is the traffic. Already it's a bugger going to Souk now. We got electric bikes, and that's great. Maybe we can do something like that. We can go faster than taking a car at 4 o'clock up to Souk. The other concern I have is that I do take the bus, not all the time, and not as much as I should when I work downtown in Victoria. And one of the concerns I have right now, and I see it all the time, is that people don't go up to Charters and grab the bus stop there, or go down to Phillips Road or Bell Vista. That's that one, but rather they cross over Drennan. They run over on Souk Road when nobody's coming. And you see the people from Drennan, from Gullidge, and that run across the road. So I suspect that the people that are at Drennan and at the new development on Charters, maybe the ones on Charters will use the new light on Charters, but the ones on Drennan will either have to walk on Souk Road to Phillips Road and Bell Vista and cross over and take the bus stop there. And there's no sidewalk there. It's not a really good place to walk. You know, on Souk Road is not a great place to walk. For them to walk up the hill to go to Charters and then cross over there, I suspect they're going to run across Souk Road when there's not traffic. It's just a concern, something that's going to happen there. I suspect there would have to be some kind of pedestrian crosswalk or something else that has to happen there. Just something to kind of think about. And then the other thing I just have to say, again, we're right by the sewage pump station. We've had 3 spills already in the years that we've lived here, and one was fairly big. That it's a bit of concern with the smell and things like that. Every time we get more units coming in, it does affect us, and it's a small number of people that it affects, but it does affect us. And it's a completely different change than it was before. It was very rural on Bell Vista, and now it's much more of a concern. But that's just kind of a side note. So, any questions for me?
No, we're just very pleased that you're able to join with us today and to share your comments and concerns about the project. So thank you for joining with us.
And again, I'm not against affordable housing. I just think in my mind, I think it's better that it's broken up into small units and spread around. And it's more of a community thing, because right now I feel that if we have 170 units across the street, I suspect that we will not get to know them. We may, but I suspect we won't. But as several smaller units around the town, I think it's just a better way for them to, feel part of the community as opposed to.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Ziegler, you've just joined the meeting. I just need you to mute, please. We're just picking up your.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to Ms. Mushata for our next speaker, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next registered speaker is Mr. Amoros. Mr. Amoros, if you could please turn on your camera and unmute your microphone, you can go ahead and address council.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. I spoke roughly on this when we had the covenant, and I'm listening to the comments tonight. I have several concerns. One is that I know this looks like an opportunity for Souk because it's a gift from outside. I have very much a concern on how this will impact Souk. I know the intent in affordable housing is to get people out of uncomfortable places that they are, and that may do that. Unfortunately, those uncomfortable places will just be backfilled by other people because of the housing needs we have. Social housing is a benefit. I, like my neighbor has said and others have said, I firmly believe for it to be effective, it needs to be integrated. Something like the Knox Vision Way is a great example of a place where you can put low-income families or those with social needs, and they're integrated into the group. My biggest fear with this is the mass size. It doesn't look that way on the drawings, but if you stand down at the Prestige Hotel, it's going to be almost the same height as the Prestige. This is 5 stories. I, for one, lived in one of these massive apartment blocks in Chilliwack in my younger years, and they are not community at all. The other thing that a huge negative is that because of the volume of such a large building, and you're talking 80 plus units, is that end of months, when people try to move in and out in these buildings, somebody has to inevitably lock the elevators out to handle their move. So all the other residents are stuck trying to accommodate a way into and out of their building during those periods. If it's a 3-story building, it's doable even. A 5-story building with kids and groceries is not, and it created tons of conflict and tons of problems. I think the comments have been made tonight about the need for just about anybody here, single, low income, or 2-family. The parking is a problem. Drennan doesn't have it. I would foresee people that can't park on the property, that need social housing, will say that they need one space, and then we'll find another, whether it's at our park and ride, or whether it's over in Sea Park for the night where they could walk through, pick up the car in the morning. But cars will be a problem. The other thing that I am surprised at, and I knew that this property, I've lived here for some time, I knew that this property was going to be residential high density. And I think from what the sign has advertised, it would have been something like what we're seeing up on the Wadhams Way, which I think looks like a very high dense but urban style housing. Even if this housing here on this lot was 1 unit and a combination of some townhouses or garden homes or something to do a mixed, as our OCPC is, it's supposed to be a range of quality of housing types and densities. All we're putting on this is 2 massive apartment buildings. Well, I've sent this as a submission, and for time tonight, I'm trying to just set it down into something a little more easy. The other real problem I have is because of this, we're going to require the street light at charters. And I know I'm a professional driver and have been, and as you do a stop and go coming up into Souk, that's an all uphill grade. So commercial trucks and those that have to drive, not many people now are driving mostly automatics, but that's going to be a problem because that's a stop and go on that hill. Right now, we come through the light, we drive up from the light in Phillips, and we can drive up to the next light and we have a flat spot to go. And we don't have that stop and go issue. That issue there is going to be a bottleneck. Living here, I can see the cars out front. The crawl now backs up almost to Cecinos as it works its way in, but at least the flow coming out of town is generally easier because of our new roundabout. I would like to see, and maybe the traffic people could expand, if that light goes in on charters, that will likely back up through to Church, and that will further back that up. So your roundabout will now get plugged. Because people, as you see, don't understand roundabouts, and they enter because there's a space and not realize that if they stood out, somebody else could be able to use that roundabout, and it blocks fairly quickly. This might be a good idea on a grander scale for an apartment size like this for citizens if it was closer to an urban center where they had the ability to get a cheap cab ride or other means to be able to get to their appointments and work. The reality is, as everybody knows, this is another 500 cars that have to commute. Most of these people, even on low incomes, have to work in the city. We currently don't have the jobs there. And until such time that the Throop Road is pushed through to Phillips, we're going to have a huge bottleneck on this area. I looked at the comments on the developer's plan, and he clearly stated those properties that he looked at and made assumptions for parking. And that was based on those that were in Langford and Colwood, where other opportunities for traffic are there. And my concern to the people that need these homes, and there's a need for these homes, is that they're going to apply to BC Housing for a subsidized rental unit someplace. And they're going to be limited to say, okay, you can't have it because you have 2 cars, and you're going to have to find a compromise. And that makes it an unfair system. And then they're going to say to many else, the only ones that we have available are for the ones that are specifically out in Souk, because the other ones will be the most desirable. I don't know how this will work in a small community. My feeling is that it's not, in our attempt to get affordable housing, we're going to go down a road that in a complex this large is more designed for social warehousing. And I don't think that is good for the people, because I think it isolates them from the community. It doesn't allow the kids to play and disperse as they do in smaller units. And although I think it looks good and we're eager to try to find a way to help, I have a real concern of how this is eventually going to play out. And I would like to ask, has any of the councillors themselves visited any one of the other BC housing units that are this large, that have been put up in the last year or two? And have you gone in and seen that sort of housing and how it's working? I haven't been able to get in because I'm not entitled to go in, but having lived in one of these complexes before, I have some real concerns on how it's going to play out. So as you can tell, I disagree with a variance in the parking, and feel that the 1.15 is probably more realistic considering they may even need that overflow on Drennan for parking to accommodate some of the units that they have around the corner on Charters. We are going to have this come forward, and I'm not sure how the sewer hooks up. As my neighbor has said, we have had several times now, because of a failure in the sewage treatment plant, that the Sun River sewage and the sewage from across the road comes to this lift station, and when it gets full, it overflows. And it overflows down the property, down our street, Bell Vista Street, and then has created a big mess in the wet area there before, because that's all open access to the harbor. The oyster guy next door, the farm, he had to shut down business because of it, because of the amount of raw sewage that was dumped. And so I have a concern on just exactly if that 150 and the other 75 will be tying into this lift station, then Souk could be very well looking at a major upgrade of that lift station or putting in something separate to accommodate. That's a lot of extra housing that particular unit on this street wasn't designed for.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Emerald, for taking the time to join with us today. I'll just share that our staff have been doing extensive work on our wastewater treatment plant and what our capacity is and what we need to plan for in the future and the like. So yeah, I appreciate you raising those concerns with us. So I'll go to our corporate officer. If you could please introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our final speaker is Mrs. Lewis. So Mrs. Lewis, if you could please go ahead and turn on your camera and unmute your microphone.
Hello, thank you. I agree with almost the majority of what Norm has just said, so you can ditto that for me. Also, another question I have is, well, there's a few. What's the building blueprint, building footprint on this property? Even though it says it's an 8.5 acre property with all the setbacks, etc. It says 50 dwelling units per hectare, but the building footprint on this is not the 8.5 acres. So now we're dealing with a density that is not really acceptable. In our OCP on your own page 227, it says low to medium density residential. Well, this is not low to medium density. It is if you're going to take it over 8.5 acres, but it's not going over 8.5 acres. It's going over a very small area, and you're putting 170 units on there. And when you look at what's already there in Drennan, they've got a dense population there, but it's hidden. It's really a beautiful setup. That's a really wonderful setup. Now we're going to put boxes up in front of them, and boxes in front of other people, destroying views and things. And it's just not a nice development. Besides that, it's not building community. I'm sure you've all lived in apartments, and you know that when you live in an apartment, you avoid everybody else in the apartment and you scoot into your own. It doesn't build community, and especially when you have such large apartment blocks, it doesn't build community. And those people all need to work. We can't be we subsidize, but we can't be, not everyone can just live off social checks and things. People work and they want to work. So we have to respect that, and they do need cars. Over and over, we hear that. I see, can't see me. Okay. Can you see me now? No? Okay, don't want to see me.
Well, you keep turning your camera off, so I haven't really.
Oh.
But just go on, Ms. Lewis. Thank you. Now you're back on.
Okay. I'm back. Okay. Is that going this? Yeah, you're creating a shadow for the people that are already living there. You're also creating a lot of traffic for the people living there. you've got in your own report here that the proposed development is larger in use, scale, and form and character within the immediate neighborhood. So why are we impacting the immediate neighborhood in that way? Always when I was served on the Board of Variance, that was one of the biggest things. How is that development going to impact your neighborhood? And everybody had to go and look at the site and see how it impacted the neighborhood. This is a big impact in the neighborhood, and it really is on the outskirts. And that's also our entrance into Souk. Is this our new Souk? 5-story buildings, you know, I totally agree we need affordable housing, but does it have to be looking like that? I don't think so. I don't think that's not building community, and it's not appropriate in that area. I think it's too large, and I think we have to look at something a little smaller. And again, very interesting, all three of the proposals tonight all have through stream running through them. Interesting. So we should be, and I know that the staff is on that with their making sure that nobody's building on there and protecting that area. So that's why I say, what's the building footprint? Because of the wetlands and the setbacks to the river and the floodplain, the setback is, the footprint is less than half, I would say. So you're there again, development permits. We have to have development permit areas so that we can work with an area what we're actually building on. What else was I going to bring up? Right, with the parking is not enough. I guess I wasn't clear enough in my last comments either. That's not enough parking. You can't have 1.1 parking lot per unit. Now adult children are moving back with their parents. So even though you have a 2-bedroom, it might be 3 adults. You have a 3-bedroom, it might be 4 adults. So people are going to need cars, because that even happened in Knox. I know that there's adult children living with their parents because they can't make it. We don't have meaningful employment. We have service industry employment. So I hope that you take that under your hat and think about it, and please don't reduce the parking, but please reduce the size of the buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lures. And so I'll just go back to our corporate officer and just confirm, was that our final registered speaker?
Yes, thank you, it is.
Okay, thank you. I just have a question for staff on the zoning. So my understanding is that this is zone medium density multifamily, an RM2 zone. Can you just share how this project fits in with the zone? I'm looking at your report here, where it's just sort of showing a comparison about what's already permissible within the zone. So that there is maximum height noted of 20 meters. The proposed is coming in at 17.8. And just a bit about the lot coverage, where the existing zone does allow for 45% coverage, but this is only covering 9.85. Could you just speak a little bit about how this is working within the zone?
Certainly. So when we look at density, it can serve in many different shapes and forms. So density might be in the case of the height of a structure based on how many stories that are allowed within the zone, or it could be based on how much land it's actually covering. So in this instance, because a lot of the areas actually being protected due to natural environmental features, that area is still part of the titled portion that can be factored into the dwelling units per hectare calculation. So currently there's a maximum density of 50 dwelling units per hectare. So if you take the 3.4 hectares for this site and multiply that by 50, you get the 170. So the initiative here was to try and maximize the amount of density that's allowed within the RM2 zone. So BC Housing's achieved that by providing for 170 affordable housing units with this proposed development. And then, as you'd mentioned, with the other regulations, they're meeting them by either having setbacks that are greater than what the minimum requirements are, or in the instance of the parking variance, that is the one regulation of the zoning bylaw that they are requesting a variance request to have relief from. So all other matters specific to the zone have been met. So it's based on the characteristics of the site as to how much lot coverage you might be able to allocate, but also the form of what you're proposing in terms of housing. And going to the official community plan as well, while it does indicate multiple forms of housing types, that's not to be specific to every single parcel. It's across the entire country residential designation from the official community plan. So we would attempt to see those forms develop over a wide area, not having them always compact within every single proposal. So in this instance, the housing type is specific to a higher density type development to accommodate those number of units.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Paulo. Okay, Council, now that we have heard from members of the public, do you have any follow-up questions for staff? Okay, so the recommendation in front of us here is that—
Maya,
sorry.
Mayor Tate? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, my hand is either up or down, I don't know. So I had a few questions through staff based on what I've just heard. That issue of charters and that stoplight and possible rollbacks by commercial vehicles heading uphill. Surely Modi is looking at this issue, of course. Question mark?
I hope so. It's a ministry road, but staff, you're working with the Ministry of Transportation staff in terms of the design and permissions and planning?
That's correct. A lot of these projects have involved the Ministry of Transportation infrastructure for quite a while. And certainly as we go through the overall master planning for transportation throughout our community, Modi has definitely been involved through that process as well. But specifically for charters and the Drennan projects, we've involved the province from the early onset to kind of design and figure out what was going to be the best signalized approach to the charters intersection.
Now, I know the mayor asked this at the outset, but I'm not sure what the answer was. When will we see that traffic analysis?
That I would have to defer to Mr. Carter if there's been recent updates with the Ministry of Transportation on that specific item.
All right. The issue of bus stops were raised and a crosswalk. Is that something you would raise with the ministry?
That's correct. All of those components are items that get identified as part of the design concept for these roads before we ultimately go to the point of construction. So any specific matters, and even in other conversations regarding pedestrian crosswalks as well, these are all pieces that have to be considered as part of the design concept for these roads.
Okay, sewage issues. Will that lift station at Bell Vista get overwhelmed with this new development?
A sewer serviceability report was submitted for this proposal early on, and so my understanding is when we received confirmation back from Stantec that it was acceptable for this proposal, and that's a standard requirement with any large-scale application being submitted, that we require those sewer serviceability reports to be acceptable before proceeding.
Now, to pull out a bit here, did the district work with BC Housing to identify this particular spot as a good spot for this kind of project, or was it because the land was available?
I don't have the specifics regarding those discussions, as it would have been prior to my arrival with the District of Sault. But I understand there was likely some conversations going on about what lands could accommodate this, and I'm not sure if there would have been any councillors at the time that might have been part of those conversations. Just noting that this is a BC Housing project, and some of those conversations may have occurred at a political level.
Okay, I hope.
So I'm just going to jump in that I don't recall a discussion at council meeting, except that there was sort of a call out as we were all looking to find sort of land, but this was zoned land, and I think our former administration had put them up. And in terms of why here and not within the town center, likely because the purchasing price of land within the town center is significantly higher.
Now, can I direct a question to our Macola reps? Are they with us?
Yep, we do have a few. Just state your question while they're
Yeah,
queuing up.
I'm curious about these, some of the expressions Mr. Amaro mentioned, social warehousing, and also the idea that these, you know, I'm one of the councillors that have not visited, had a site visit with a BC housing project. However, I'm very interested to know what kind of lifestyles are going on in this. I think these are rather new model versions of affordable housing, given the mix and the attempt to integrate various income levels into the same unit. I'm wondering how successful those have been.
I'm happy to answer that, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Albers. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would just say that certainly not our first project where there's a mix of income levels. McCall has been doing this with various projects funded and supported by BC Housing for many years now. Really, the goal is to actually mix income levels and rent levels within housing projects to really provide sort of a blend of options and for neighbors to see how other neighbors live and what their income sort of how they live in that kind of environment. So that's been going on for quite some time. You know, housing projects now are certainly on the larger side because of the excessively high cost of land. So we're having to see these higher densified types of projects to spread the fixed costs across a higher number of units. Certainly not the largest project we're working on projects that are upwards of over 300 units in an environment. But as the owner operator, I think it's important to understand that we're there for the whole term for the next 60 years, and we try to create community within our housing developments as well. And that's an important part of what we provide as an affordable housing provider. So I think there are ways, and we've been able to demonstrate ways of creating community within our housing projects and within our housing communities to support the tenants that want to engage and create a community within their developments.
Thank you. One final question, and that relates to the demographics in if there is such a thing as a typical McCullough project. I imagine it's not all commuters. There must be some elderly and people who are fixed in their communities. Do you have percentage breakdowns?
I couldn't say there's a specific percentage that I could apply to any one housing project, but again, we're trying to create a healthy family kind of community where there's a mix of those family sizes, right? So again, this development is across the entire continuum. We're going to have everything from singles that could be single younger people to single older people, elders, and then families in between. So it's really a cross section of the demographic. We don't try to engineer that in any way, but you can just tell from the levels of affordability and then the unit size is what you would actually accomplish within a building, within a community such as this being proposed here on Dren.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Councillor St. Pierre, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. I was curious about the selection process again, just going back there just for a second. I had some concerns about if someone gets on the BC housing list and they're not necessarily from Souk, will Souk be essentially, or I should say, our larger urban centers like Victoria are going to be solving their problems by sending them to Souk? I believe that we should be taking care of people in Souk. I believe that we need affordable housing desperately. Our local economy needs affordable housing so that we can have baristas that can actually, so we need that really, really bad. But my understanding is that this is a BC housing. I mean, you're looking at the province. And I think you mentioned that Nicola has the ability to make a choice, but then there's a 20% where it's not necessarily up to you. And I'd just like you maybe to elaborate on that a little bit, on how much, what are our risks as far as that goes, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, really good question. So the way Kayla explained it for charters, it applies pretty much the same way for this project. At the end of the day, there's a population of units within Dren where McCullough has the ability to generate the wait list and actually pick people from the wait list to fill those units within Dren. And so that's really what happens. The wait list is generated from the community. We had the same kind of conversations when we opened 6750 West Coast Road as well. How are we going to ensure that there's going to be Souk residents that would be effectively provided with preference? And that's pretty easy to do because it's the community of Souk that is told about this project, that the project is promoted to firstly. and they're the first people that get on that wait list. We've already had great conversations with South Nation. We've had the Elder Shirley Alphonse and Chief Plans come and actually bless these pieces of land. They're already talking to their community. So there's this automatic connection that provides almost like a front end loading of that wait list. So I think it's pretty fair to say that certainly that initial set of tenants that will choose Drennan to be their home will be Souk residents, and maybe people that are choosing to move to Souk and call Souk their home in the future might make up the future tenants and families that will call Drennan their home.
Thank you very much. Just one more question in terms of form and character. I do tend to see that 5 stories is definitely not in keeping with the rest of the community. And I assume just from what's been said that the money's not there, but I'd like confirmation that there's really not an option at going lower than 5 stories.
Yeah, and I would probably defer to Kayla on this. I'm sure she's going to be able to explain to you why it takes the form that it takes in a much better and more eloquent way than I can explain it. So I'll put it over to Kayla.
Yes, I can confirm that we are able to achieve a financial model with the 5 stories, given the limitations of the site and taking into account the different environmental considerations as well as the archaeological site. In addition, I would just also speak to the fact that we have committed to building the public path through this particular site, which is a cost that this project will bear, and the more units we're able to spread across those costs across, the more financially viable the overall project becomes. So there's a number of frontage improvements and whatnot that we're also including in this in the development costs that I do think are benefiting the larger community as well.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mikola, for your giving those answers. So I think that's it for members of council. So yeah, thank you. If you could, perfect. Okay, so I see council in front of me. So what we have here is a recommendation that council issue development permit PLN 01462 for the purpose of developing a 170 unit multifamily housing site at 2075 Drennan Street and approve a variance to section 4.8 parking requirements of zoning bylaw number 600, zoning bylaw 600, 2013 to reduce the required parking stall ratio from 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit to 1 parking space per dwelling unit. So look, so that's moved by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. So on the motion now, Councillor Logans, any comment?
Not at this time. I just want to remind everyone this is about parking. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in front of council. It would be going ahead. And again, I feel like this is a beautiful development. It's going to look amazing in that location, and I'm sure it's going to be a real benefit to the community. I've heard some comments from folks about, well, why don't we have these units in town and these folks can live in town, but the units in town are $2,200 a month, and that's not affordable for folks. So that's why we have to start building units outside of downtown Victoria and downtown Langford, and this is a perfect spot for it. It does pose some challenges. Those challenges are not worth stopping this development from going ahead.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor St. Pierre?
I'd like to further comment that in terms of actually the number of cars that are likely to be turning to go to Victoria for work, people are much more likely to be turning to walk into Souk to find work, because that housing is going to be affordable, and people are going to be able to take a job in Souk, again, at the local coffee shop, in the local grocery store, whatever, and actually pay for their rent. That's the idea behind affordable housing, and without it, we just won't have a local economy. It's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, but this is a great way to start.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, again, being a dissenter, we just went through the parking thing in this previous one, which was 1.13, and now we're going to 1 on this one, which is even worse. You've got 3-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, all for the same reasons I said before. The parking is just out of touch with what's really going to happen in Souk. And they are going to overflow onto the streets, and the neighbors have expressed, many have written letters saying that they're opposed to this. And I know we're not supposed to talk about the overall thing, although everybody else seems to. I do think it's social warehousing. I look at Knox, we got the Charters one, we got Drennan, got Lot A, which we're looking at seniors housing, low income seniors housing. And I would like to see more of a mix in a neighborhood. I think we're too much in one area. I'm all for some of the social housing. 179 units, I think is too much. I'd like to see it scaled back, and I'd like the parking to be something better than one per unit. Boy, I have a 3-bedroom unit and I'm trying to find a parking spot. No, I'm sorry, I can't support this.
Okay, thank you. Other councillors have any comments? Councillor McMath?
In the ideal world, we would all have acreages with beautiful homes and lots of space and have that, but we can't afford it. And speaking as someone who has like a well-paying job and a partner that has a well-paying job, we can barely afford a mediocre home right now. So I think I've heard a lot of people reference a few things. One being, I used to live in one, but I don't anymore. My property is spacious. Like these sorts of comments, like I think there's like a little bit of disconnect between the younger crowd and I don't want to say the older crowd, but the crowd that's already settled, the crowd that's already established. And so, yeah, there's some parking challenges. That's something for us to tackle later, but the affordable housing crisis is a real issue. It's not this niche group of people that can't afford. It's a massive sector of youth. It's not just this small parcel of the community. It's your up and coming community that can't afford to get into the market. And so, yeah, I'm absolutely for this project, and parking is something that we as a district can tackle later.
Thank you, Councillor McMath. Other comments? Councillor Beddoes or Councillor Lajeunesse, go ahead, then Bateman.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that it's not only youth that are low income. There are a lot of low income seniors out there. So I think in that you do get a mix of demographics in these developments.
Councillor Bateman.
Yeah. I've gone dry.
Okay.
What I will say is,
maybe not.
As a comment, no, it's a bubbling spring. I agree that I was very taken with that point from Mr. Albers about 60 years. This is Souk in 60 years time will be a very different place. Unfortunately, to me, I'll be long gone. And I get to live in a half-acre rancher here. And but I do know, looking at the, again, I'm going off topic because we're talking about a parking variance. So I'll go back to what I said last time. It's up to the district to ensure that those residents on Gollage and Drennan are going to be respected as we move forward with this project, if indeed we do. Thank you.
So I'll just clarify, this one is to approve the development permit with variance. So that's why you can speak about the whole thing. And staff did go into some about the form and character for the site. The other one, you know, it varied because we did it in sections. Councillor Beddoes, did you have a second comment, or is that just a residual hand?
No, I don't know. Now my hand has disappeared again, and I don't know why that. No, my hand was not up.
Okay.
It showed it, but it wasn't.
Okay, very good. So just further to what Council has said, and I respect the comments from our public that were here. It is alarming when you sort of find out that what was once quiet and empty beside you now has building coming in front of you. So I totally appreciate that perspective there. I think the challenges of this particular site is the riparian area and the archaeological site and respecting the integrity of those areas. And that's what makes the buildable site a bit more of a challenge. Over on Church with the Knox Vision property, they encountered something similar in that there's a memorial cemetery in place there, which made the build out a little bit more of a challenge to meet because of those particular setbacks that are in place. I think that the applicant, in this case, Macola, is trying to build community with this, with the community garden, the play space, the trails, and the outdoor areas. When folks have an ability to gather and recreate outside their home, it does build community. I had the opportunity to view some of the sites, but not when folks were living in them. So in terms of the other question from a resident, in terms of what have we been able to tour, it's usually when the building is vacant so that we can respect the privacy of the tenants that are already living in the space. Otherwise, you have us all sort of looking at people. I myself have lived in rental accommodation and used to manage property. There is community that forms and some people that don't want any part of it. And that's totally fine because that's how we all live. You have neighbors that are hermits and neighbors that interact, and that's how we live together. But I do feel that in terms of the 3 bedrooms, which I'm glad we have because we have families jammed into 2-bedroom units. And so now parents and children have a bit more space, and maybe there's a second child on the way that will also, you know, provide an option for a family to remain in place and not have to move because they're expanding their family. And I think that's wonderful that they have those options available. Councillor McMath is correct in terms of the housing crisis that is out there and how expensive it is. I mean, I'm feeling the stretch myself and here we are, but it's cost of living is expensive. It continues to get that way, and it's hard for anyone to enter into the market, but at least perhaps this will provide families and individuals through the rent, subsidized rent, the ability to save and to actually buy one of those lovely acreages that may come on the market as other folks may choose to downsize. We do hear seniors right now that are living in too much space and too much land, but there's no place for them to go. So they're just managing with a property that may be too big to meet their needs. So on that note, I'm just recognizing the hour. I'm going to call the question on this. So all those in favor of the motion? And is anyone opposed? Councillor Beddoes is opposed. The motion carries. It's coming up at 10:15, and I realize that we have 2 delegations. I'm just going to ask our corporate officer, am I able to reorder the agenda so that the delegations can go ahead?
Thank you, Worship. You are, but I think the next 2 items are slam dunk. It's just adoption of the minutes and final adoption of the council procedure bylaw.
Oh, very true. Okay, so I'm just going to roll ahead and we'll see what happens. Okay, so item 7.4 is the council procedure amendment bylaw. It is here for final adoption. I'm seeing that there's public input or council discussion though. So can I just get clarity from corporate officer? Is there any public input registered on this item?
No, Your Worship, there's nobody registered to speak.
Okay, so any council discussion on this item?
Move adoption.
Move adoption by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any discussion? Raise your hand, please. Seeing no movement, all those in favor? Is anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. We have a block of meeting minutes here from our regular council meeting of October 25th, regular November 23rd, special November 30th, committee of the whole December 7th. All here for adoption, please.
So
Move adoption by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Perhaps Councillor Bateman, in the essence of time, if you are noting any sort of typos, if you could just maybe give corporate officers a call tomorrow so we can get to our
It's already been
delegations.
done. Thank you.
All done. You're awesome. Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question on adoption, please. All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Excellent. That brings us right to the delegation. The first one, 9.1, is the Souk Region Multi-Belief Initiative. So I'd like to invite our speakers, and as soon as you start speaking, I will start timing, and you have 5 minutes.
Mayor, I'd just like to clarify that while I'm a member of this group, tonight's report is for information. So I will.
Okay, I understand, Councillor Bateman. It's just a presentation, so that's fine. To our presenters that have come on, there's a bit of feedback occurring. So if you're in the same room, you're going to have, one of you will need to mute, please.
I'm not sure whether it's me or.
Depending
I
on
think
another.
it is Mr. Ziegler. I only noticed it when you joined us, so.
Yes. I don't want to disrupt this. It might be simpler for Don Brown to give the presentation. Don?
Well, I don't think he has it now. I think it's okay now, isn't it?
Okay, go ahead, please.
I think you're okay now, Mark.
Okay, just very quickly, the purpose of this presentation is just to give a one-year report on the Souk Compassionate Action Plan. Council approved it in May of last year, and there were 5 areas of focus: homelessness, affordability, social isolation, the need for improved medical services, and then better sort of awareness, communication, collaboration between organizations and agencies. And I'm sorry for this echo. But this is a good news update. There's been considerable progress. Effective actions have been taken thanks to council and the community groups, agencies, the provincial government. There's been especially good progress in the areas of improved medical services, and we can thank the Mayor's Primary Healthcare Committee for that. And really good coordination between groups such as the district, BC Housing, the Souk Families Services, the Souk Region Community Health Network. And so we've really made progress. There were 15 short-term actions that we had across the 5 areas of concern, and progress has been made to some extent on 13 of them. So this is a good news report, and I should mention that this action plan is held by Charter for Compassion International, which is a worldwide organization. And that little sign that's on the kiosk in downtown Souk about Souk being a compassionate community, it reflects that we are committed to improving things. There's still much work to be done, especially on social isolation, and the COVID-19 pandemic hasn't helped. We still have a need for a more permanent accommodation for the homeless. You've been talking about affordability all evening, especially housing affordability. So that's an area where more work needs to be done. But overall, we're just here to say that, good on Souk. We've made some progress. More work needs to be done. There are still people falling between the cracks. And perhaps a more holistic approach, one that doesn't, for instance, doesn't deal with medical issues just from the physical side, but in a more holistic way from sort of emotional and spiritual issues that affect the residents of Souk as well. We live in a good community, but I think we can live in an even better community. And what we'd like to do is to have a look at the document and come back every year and give you a sense of how we're doing. We submitted a 13-page report to you with descriptions of work that's being done under the various actions, and I hope you have a chance to look at it. But I think I've rambled on enough, and we're moving forward. Still much work to be done.
And just to add to that, we've made recommendations to 3 recommendations to the OCP for this year, and hopefully that we'll be able to pass this document on to them.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brown and Mr. Ziegler, for joining us virtually tonight. We certainly appreciate the work that you're doing, especially in the challenges that COVID is bringing on us. Now I have that echo. I'll just need you to mute. I think that's why it's picking up. But I think Souk is a compassionate and caring place because of individuals like yourselves. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. We really appreciate it. Okay, take care and all the best over the holidays. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Okay, I'd like to now welcome our second delegation, which is Ms. Diane Moran, the Youth Arts Exhibit 2021, The Art of Kindness. Sorry for the late hour, but thank you for hanging with us tonight.
Oops. Sorry. Well, good evening. My name is Diane Moran, and I'm a visual artist and a small business owner in Souk and Port Renfrew. I wish to share with Council a special art exhibition titled Mindfulness in May, The Art of Kindness. This exhibition will take place in Souk, celebrating BC Youth Week and National Mental Health Weeks, May 13th through 15th, 2021. This is a collaborative project between myself, the Souk Arts Council, and the Amber Academy. School District 62, and the Canadian Mental Health Association based in Victoria have both been contacted and support the exhibition. Their involvement will begin sometime in early January. I'm also seeking support from the District of Souk. Please endorse this art exhibition by allowing us to add your logo to our publications and by sponsoring it with a $500 contribution that will help make this exhibition a further success. The sponsorship funds will be used to help with framing costs, call-outs, submissions, exhibition advertising, and other related expenses. There will also be 4 cash prizes for the Sponsors' Choice Awards and a People's Choice Award. These awards will help acknowledge our young artists and give them added incentive to participate in this exhibition. I have secured a private funder, and I'm also waiting to hear from the Victoria Foundation about the grant that I've applied for. All of my efforts are 100% volunteer. Now more than ever, we as a community need to find innovative ways to celebrate our youth, to acknowledge the arts, and be mindful about how important it is for us to be connected and kind, even through COVID. In honor of BC Youth Week and National Mental Health Weeks, I hope that the District of Souk will sponsor and endorse this event. Thank you for your time, consideration. I'm open to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for joining with us tonight and for the information that you've provided. Do I have any questions from members of council? I think what we can do is take this now that we have your delegation, and we can take this and then I'll be looking for a councillor to put forward a notice of motion so that we can address that at the next meeting.
Thank you very much.
Councillor St. Pierre?
We'll want to do that under new business, I take it?
Yeah, well, you can, when we get to it, which may not be tonight, that's where I can read out a notice of motion that would then go to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Mushada, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to remind Council that under the community grant and sponsorship policy, Council can consider sponsorship policies throughout the year separate from the community grant application process for amounts up to $500.
Okay, however, we can cover that under new business though, right? As a motion, a potential motion?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Ms. Moran, and
thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All the best to you. Thank you so much. Okay, so our next item 10, is report of the CAO, Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. McInnes.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will forego my report tonight, but I do look forward to the first meeting in January with a full update on the Council Strategic Priorities chart and how we're doing with that and the process to replenish that chart.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McInnes. Item 11 is our public question and comment period. So I'll ask our corporate officer again, do we have members of the public registered to speak at this time?
We do have one person registered, and that is Sifu Moonfist. He indicated he may or may not speak, so I'll defer to him.
Okay, Sifu Moonfist, this would be the time now if you're still with us today. Yeah, there we are. Welcome. And you have 2 minutes, so I will start the timer.
Thank you, and hello all. Very nice to see you. First time I've sat through a meeting like this in a long time. Feels great. I would really like to take a minute first to commend and to make mention of the Souk Multi-Belief Initiative group. People that I would really like to point out are specifically Mark Ziegler and Don Brown and Jeff Bateman, Council Jeff Bateman. Also, Pastor Rick Eby. These are, in my consideration, people that are the very core of this initiative and mean so much to me. It has been a pleasure, and it still will be a pleasure for some time to be connected with this group. And I just thought that I would make comment on that as an extra little beautiful karma push of goodness. That's it on that. I just have one more really quick comment, and that is, Councillor Albedos, I have such a great respect for you. And if you're not, I always feeling to have to toe the line. And I have a great respect for all council. I don't always agree with everything everybody says. So when I see somebody else that is like that as well, all I can say is praise and press. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moonfist. We're very pleased to see you. It has been some time, so we just continue to wish you well, and we could all use a bit of good karma. So thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today, and all the best over the holidays to you and yours. Thank you. Okay, Council, item 12 is our consent agenda, and that is that agenda items 12.1 to 12.3 be adopted by general consent. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Beddoes has moved it. Councillor St. Pierre is seconding it.
No.
Nope.
I want to withdraw something from it.
I see. Okay, spoken haste.
And
Which would you like?
12.2 para 2.
12.22.
That
Okay.
council directs staff to develop a purpose-based engagement strategy for tree management.
Okay.
That's the one I want removed. The rest of it I'm fine with.
Okay, so we're withdrawing that. Is there any, oh, Councillor McMath, I see your hand. Is there anything you would like to withdraw?
No, I think it's just weirdly stuck there, even though I put it down.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
It's gone now.
So I see, no, it's gone. Okay, and Councillor Beddoes is up. So that's okay. So we have all items except for that. So I'm going to call the question then on the motion to adopt all of these. All those in favor?
I'm not sure that Councillor Beddoes actually moved that.
Well, I thought he could just oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay.
The motion was to move all except the ones that Councillor, oh, sorry, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So I need to do this again. I need a mover and a seconder for this. So moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Bateman. All items to be adopted by general consent except for the tree management strategy. Okay, got it. All those in favor, please. Is anyone opposed? No, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we will address the purpose-based engagement strategy for tree management. So, yeah, so Councillor Beddoes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just that when we dealt with that as the council of the whole, it was, I think, a 4-3 decision to send it back, and I would just like to reconfirm that that's exactly what we want to do. I was not happy with sending it back. I would like it to be put on the back shelf for a good number of years until Souk matures a bit more. I found it very controversial. I found a lot of communities not support for that. And I really don't want to see it again in the next couple of years. So I would move that we just dust that one, put that in the archives for the near future, foreseeable future.
Okay, I don't quite, maybe what I'll do then is, because this is just withdrawn as is can I look perhaps that I will read this out and then we would just vote accordingly?
Yeah, sure. However you
Okay.
want to handle it. I just feel that for me to vote for it when I voted against it the first time.
Got it. That's why, okay, no, I
Yeah,
understand. I
that's basically
understand.
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm going to read this out then, and then we'll get it. It'll stand alone as its own motion. So that is that council directs staff to develop a purpose-based engagement strategy for tree management. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Logans. So we did hear Councillor Beto's rationale for withdrawing it. That's fine. Do you have anything to add, Councillor St. Pierre and Logans? Starting with Councillor St. Pierre.
Just very quickly, the tree management bylaw is needed at this point so that when we have a property, even without a development permit, especially larger properties, we can actually have some sort of influence. Right now, we have a situation where any property can be clear cut at any point in time. We have absolutely no barriers whatsoever anywhere in the community. That's not actually what most people in Souk want. It's clear from the correspondence we received, from comments from the community, many people support having a tree management bylaw. I think what we need to do is make sure that it actually works, and that's why we need to have further engagement with the community, and a purpose-based engagement tool is what we need. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Logans.
Yes, we have a committee of the whole for a purpose, which is to deeply debate these topics, and we deeply debated this topic. This is one that will, it will be controversial, and it should be controversial. That's why we're here as 7 members of council with differing views, and that's kind of what the beauty of being in this scenario is. So in situations like this, I'm glad that there are split decisions, and I think that's part of how it should go. I don't see why anyone would change their vote from the committee of the whole, but I hope we just continue with this. It's something that we need, and I would like to see it moving ahead. We do have the opportunity to slow the process down during the strategic planning, and also the opportunity to gain more feedback from the public in the future as this moves ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Logans. Councillor McMath?
Every single person in this meeting tonight has spoken about affordable housing, and you talk about what your community wants. If you were to ask your community what was the most top 3 like important issues, the tree bylaw would not be one of them. There is a time and a place, and every single one of us had a platform of affordable housing focusing on healthcare. A tree bylaw is not something to push through during a pandemic, and there is absolutely no harm in, at the very least, holding off until we reconnect for a strat meeting together and we discuss like what are the community's priorities right now. A pandemic does not necessitate a tree bylaw, and if anything, we've just added to like the weight of mental health issues by ramming through this so quickly, and it's irresponsible when we are unable to complete meaningful engagement with our community. We had technical issues our previous meeting. We've all acknowledged that this survey was tragic at best. We even referred to it as leading, and even with it being a leading survey, the majority of the people that responded did not want the bylaw to come forward. So what are we doing here? Because for us to say we want affordable housing, but now you want people to pay for a permit, you want them to pay $300 to have an arborist come through, and then you want them to pay for the tree work. Like development companies, large scale development companies are not going to eat those costs. It's going to get passed on to the purchaser. So I really think if you voted for it, you should really assess what your community is at right now and if that is a priority, because the answer is it's not.
Thank you, Councillor McMath. Other speakers? Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't feel that we need a tree bylaw right now. Of the 502 large properties, most of them have been owned and cared for by long-term families and multi-generations. And to have people come along and tell them what they can do with their property at this point is just not fair. I don't think it's necessary. People have been good stewards of those properties for generations, and I just don't feel the need for it, especially now.
Are there comments from any other first-time speakers?
Yeah, I'll
Councillor
jump in.
Vateman?
I agree with Councillor Lajeunesse that we have long-term families here who understand the forest and know how to manage it. And one of the key points I raised as we move forward, a task force that would involve individuals from that community, come up with a way to, as Councillor St. Pierre says, ensure we don't see any clear cuts. There's miscommunication around what this bylaw entailed, the fact that it really only applies to under 20% of Souk households. And in turn, 49% is a total opposed or slightly opposed. The OCP claims environment is job one, and in the new OCP review, mobilized to address the climate emergency head on is number one of the 13 themes that have come up through the latest public engagement process. So, and as Councillor McMath says, in January, we'll look at that strat plan and maybe we'll push it back a bit. But maybe at the same time, we can also get some policy in place to prevent stripping properties before development permits are issued.
Okay, for myself, I do agree that I feel that there are challenges with a tree bylaw, and so I didn't vote in favor of a tree bylaw. What I voted in favor was a purpose-based engagement strategy for tree management. And what that looks like, I'm not sure exactly, but I do feel that we need some kind of a policy, some kind of a tool that looks at large-scale development. I've seen development practices where many trees are retained and the development weaves in beautifully with the property, and I've seen others that have basically blown up a mountainside, stripped everything off, and then it's a push to get a ornamental tree planted, if that. So there needs to be something, and that's where I do feel that there is an avenue for us to continue on to look at what that is. Do I want something on rural properties that say you need an arborist or that? No, I don't. But I do feel that, and I'm seeing other community members agree that we need something that respects the environment and what that looks like. So that is what I supported. I didn't support a tree bylaw, but I did support what is on here and what does that look like. So whether this will be our next first quarter priorities, I'm not sure. We'll wade through that together. As I've said before, we do have strategic planning coming our way in January. But in the meantime, to just archive this and have it pop up, that's why it is what it is now. Because for years, council has said, oh, we'll deal with it later, and then it grows and grows and grows, and then it comes before us. So let's address it once and for all. Let's find an appropriate tool that works in our growing community. Will it be something that will meet everyone's needs? Probably not, but it's democracy. And at the end of the day, we have good discussion. As Councillor Logan said, we call a question and we move on. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call a question on this. All those in favor of the motion? And opposed? Councillor Beddoes, McMath, and Lajeunesse are opposed. The motion carries. Okay, 15 minutes. Okay, so we made it through the consent agenda. Just seeing where we are here and the public input. Reports, 13.1 Employee Service Awards for 2020. Excellent. Love all the work that our staff are doing. Thank you so much for all of your many
Point of order.
What?
Official Community
Sorry.
Plan Advisory Committee.
That was adopted with the consent agenda. Was it not? Yeah, that was part of the consent agenda from 12.1 to 12.3.
Thank you. My apologies.
That's okay. So I'd just like to recognize and thank our staff for their years of service. I understand that there has been certificates made, and so thank you very much for staying with us and for the many contributions. So basically the resolution is that council acknowledge the following employees for their dedicated service and long-term commitment to the District of Sauk: Susan Diable for 20 years, Matt Barney for 15, Deborah Knight for 15, Chris McRae for 10, Cam Norris-Jones for 10 years, Brad Metzger for 10, and Brian Derrick for 5 years. Thank you so much. And I would like a mover and a seconder for this motion, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. We'll say congratulations together, and I'll call a question. All those in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you, and pause for applause for all. Deputy Mayor's 13.2. Pretty straightforward. January, February, Councillor Bateman. March, April, Councillor Logans. May, June, Councillor Lajeunesse. July, August, Councillor St. Pierre. September, October, Councillor Beddoes. November, December, Councillor McMath. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll be able to take time off or go somewhere and in that time period. So the motion is that council appoint the following deputy mayors for 2021, as I noted. I'll look for a mover, please. Councillor McMath, and seconded by Councillor Bateman. If something does occur in your lives that you need to make a change, though, we can do that. Okay, so just keep that in mind as the next year unfolds. All those in favor of the resolution? And no one's opposed. That's carried unanimously. The next off is our 2021 regular council meeting schedule. So the dates are listed below. This is something that legislatively we have to decide in advance and publish out accordingly. So there is a process for that. So I'll look for a member of council to approve the 2021 regular council meeting schedule. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? Opposed? There's none opposed. That carries unanimously. Council appointments to the CRD committees. So sort of done a survey a bit. So the first one is that council appoint Councillor Dana Lajeunesse to the CRD Arts Commission for a term of 2 years, commencing January 1st, 2021 and expiring as of the next general local election. Moved by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor McMath. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next up is that council appoint Councillor Ebony Logans to the CRD Regional Housing Trust Fund for a term of 2 years, commencing January 1st, 2021 and expiring as of the next general local election. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Bateman. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you both for your service at the CRD on these committees. We do have item 13.5, Climate Action Committee, and that is that council consider the Climate Action Committee recommendations as follows. That council directs staff to, actually, what I was wondering with this here, I made a note that our building bylaw discussion is returning to us in January. So it may make more sense that we receive these together at that time so that we can see how this change would impact that bylaw. So I'm going to ask that the first one, that council direct staff to investigate the opportunities for the rough-in wiring, that be tabled to come back to us at the same time the building bylaw discussion is occurring.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor McMath. That makes sense to anyone? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. The second one, though, is that council forward the plastics report from this Climate Action Committee to staff for review and consideration. So
moved.
Okay, moved by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any discussion? Councillor McMath?
With these recommendations that come forward from the Climate Action Committee, there's a cost and a time associated with that with staff. Maybe the CAO can speak to this, but how is this being managed? And is maybe there a better process for us to look at?
Parks Environmental Services is the key technical representative to the Climate Action Committee. So it does take some time. We do have corporate services that also provides administrative support. But as I think I suggested earlier in the meeting, the climate adaptation and mitigation study our report will come to council in January. So we've been working quite hard on putting together a study that I hope will inform the Climate Action Committee and our new Community Economic Development Committee if it gets approved later on in the agenda tonight or at a subsequent meeting. So I think that that strategy will help inform and I hope provide some guidance for our work in climate action going forward.
Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted clarity around, because theoretically they could throw a ton of recommendations and a ton of work to staff. So I just want to know if there is a better practice for us to manage that.
Yeah. So
or if you would jump in to be like, hey, we can do this, but there's something else we have to take off the table. What do you want to do? Like those kinds of conversations. So
yes, if the adaptation and mitigation strategy gets approved by council, that will give me some leeway to help keep the focus of the Climate Action Committee within those two pieces, which I think is really what we want to concentrate on. So the adaptation piece will be more on the response recovery piece. The mitigation really is all of the work that we're doing with the Transportation Master Plan, the Parks and Trails Master Plan, and the Building Bylaw. Those are the big areas to help us reduce our GHG reductions. So if council approves the report that's going to come forward, it certainly will give me some advice or leeway to help our staff in coordinating with the Climate Action Committee going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bateman, you had a question on the motion or comment?
I don't have a question. I have comments. I guess we hope that every committee will do its best to put forward what it believes, and that we as a council have the opportunity to say thanks, but no thanks. And so I would not want to hobble any committee from doing its best. I think I'd like to say thanks to Ms. Keogan and Ms. Schlattner for bringing forward such a solid document, rigorously researched, fact-based, footnoted, and hopefully really useful probably in a file somewhere, but still a useful document. And the only thing missing is a reference to the fact that SUC did in fact pass a checkout bag regulation bylaw back in May, June of 2019. And of course that was shelved by the Supreme Court decision for the City of Victoria. And, you know, high five. I'd also, if I was writing that report, would have said thank you to Village Foods and Western for independently moving ahead with their own ban that was of course overturned by COVID. So okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor St. Pierre? No.
As Councillor Bateman has pointed out, the report was, a lot of work went into the report. At this point, it's a report. Our staff has theoretically been working further, or will be working further on the bylaw that we passed with regards to plastics. So this is for their use. That's as far as it goes.
Okay, perfect. I'll call a question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor McMath is opposed, and that carries. Our next up is item 13.6, Climate Action Committee Terms of Reference Review.
Move recommendation.
The recommendation is moved by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor, do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything on the motion, Councillor Logans? There's a lot of good edits here. No, Councillor St. Pierre, anything? Okay, so we see this here. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? And that is that we're amending the climate action terms of reference. Okay, and that carries unanimously. Thank you. 13.7, I just saw a note that went somewhere that I think Ms. Mushada, that perhaps this could be tabled to our January meeting.
Yes, that's correct. I think that there's no urgency in this one, but may spark some debate, but it's also tied to another report that you will receive on January 11th.
Okay, so a motion to table this to our January 11th meeting, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor McMath. In the meantime, thank you staff for getting this up and going. All those in favor of tabling? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We're moving there. 14 is here for adoption. 14.1. That is that council adopt the bylaw cited as COVID-19 Safe Restart Reserve Fund bylaw number 7494 2020. Here for adoption.
Sorry,
So moved.
order. Before we start jumping into the next few bylaws, because it's 10:55 right now, can we move the rest of these items, including this one, to the special?
Okay, this is just here to adopt, so perhaps can we just finish this one because we've had rounds of discussion on this.
I don't think it will be finished in 4 minutes.
Well, this one will. This is bylaw 14.1. It's just adoption.
Items for adoption should go quickly, and then after that we should have a vote whether or not we go past 11 before we start tabling items to a new meeting. And we also need to consider the timeliness of the notice of motion, 2 notice of motions ahead.
Yeah, so that's adoption. We've had a full, I'm going to call the question on adoption. All those in favor of adoption? Anyone opposed?
I'm not clear what we're voting on yet. Please restate what you're doing.
Okay, what I'm doing is I proposed, and it's been moved and seconded, that council adopt the bylaw cited as COVID-19 Safe Restart Reserve Fund bylaw as stated. We've had rounds of discussion and moved 3 readings of this. Okay, so it's adoption. Yep. Okay, I'll do this again. All those in favor of adoption? Anyone opposed? Councillor McMath is opposed. That carries. 14.2, that council adopt the bylaw cited as revision bylaw number 802-2020. Move adoption by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor of adoption? Anyone opposed? Councillor McMath is opposed, and that carries. And then I'm going to pause here because this is where we hit a notice of motion and the 5, and then there's a few notice of motions, and then we have our financial plan bylaw, sewer specified area, and then we get into some correspondence. So given the hour here, I'm going to ask council if there is a motion to extend the meeting past 11 o'clock. Seeing no desire to keep on meeting, and I totally appreciate that. So we will stop here. So council, this does cause us to have a special meeting. Councillor Logans, do you have a point of order?
Sorry, not a point of order. I was just wondering if we could move some of the timely notice of motions forward so that we can deal with like food bank and that sort of thing. There are a couple that are requesting to waive notice because they wanted to be dealt with immediately.
So I'm confused on what you're asking because I'd like to move them forward tonight. I'm not seeing any appetite to continue this meeting. So what I was just saying is that all of these items will move to a special meeting this Wednesday.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because I'm not seeing any interest in continuing past 11. So when we meet again on Wednesday, we'll be starting basically from 14.3 through to item 18, and that's where we will commence this work accordingly. So we'll deal with all of it there. Okay, so it'll be this coming Wednesday at 7 o'clock, a special meeting of council, starting off with item 14.3. Ms. Mushata?
I recommend that council make a motion to postpone the remainder agenda items to a special meeting to be held December 16th at 7 p.m.
Perfect. That's what I needed to hear. Thank you. We've all heard that. So that is moved by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor Bateman.
Just I have a question.
Yes, Councillor Beddoes?
Is everybody going to be there on Wednesday?
That was going to be my question.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Do I have quorum on Wednesday?
If it's not at 1 p.m.
It would be at 7, as I said, so 7 o'clock special meeting. If you're not available, can you say something? Okay, so it looks like we have all of council attending. It will be another virtual meeting, and so we will pick this up at that time. So I'll call the question on the motion of postponement. All those in favor of postponement? Is anyone opposed? None opposed, so I guess I'll get to see you all one last time. That's excellent. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, staff. I know that this is a very full agenda. I think we actually did quite well, all things considering. So thank you for your many contributions to this. And on that, I will call for, I see Ms. Mushada's hand up again. So is there something else, Ms. Mushada?
Sorry, thank you.
Okay, we got it. That's the hands. Okay, so I will call the question on adjourn or make a motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Bateman and seconded by Councillor McMath. So until then, keep well, keep happy, and stay safe. All those in favor of adjournment? Anyone opposed? Nope, that carries unanimously. Thank you all and good night and all the best to staff and congratulations to those with anniversaries. Take good care. Motion meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Tate out.